Hi, everyone.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We'll give people a chance to get logged in, but we are going to get started pretty soon here. Can you guys see my screen too, by the way? Okay, very good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I see a lot of new people here. That's exciting. All right, we're going to give about 2 more minutes for people to join, and then we're going to get started, and then people can catch up when they join, or they can watch the replay. All the replays will be inside the credit community. I'm almost caught up with everything else in there, and we'll go over that soon as well. Hi there, Shola. How are you? Afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located at. Hi, Andres. How are you? Welcome, everyone. I'm going to put one last post in here, and then we are going to get started in 1 minute. All right. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining today. Today is my birthday. I'm not going to mention how old I am, but I think from here on out, I'll just be 40 for every year. That's just proof to show you it's never too late. Thank you so much. And I had a good birthday so far, and I'm going to continue to have a great birthday weekend. I'm going to be going out to dinner with my family who's here waiting on me. So I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. But yeah, I got started on my credit journey late in life. So it's never too late to work on your credit. It's never too late to start a business. A lot of people think, oh, I got started too late. No, we're right on time because obviously there wasn't anything of interest there prior. And now there is like a huge interest there for us now, right? So tonight we're going to be talking about how to fix your credit and how to get up to 50K in funding. But we want to do this very strategically, right? When we're going after funding and we've never really had funding in the past, this is going to be what kind of, sets the foundation for us, right? So it's really important that we move very slowly because we don't want to take on more than we can handle, right? Because I've seen so many people take on Credit Strong, sign up for Self Lender, sign up for a lot of these like credit builder programs that, I'm not just a huge fan of. I'll be honest with you guys, right? I'm all about quality now. Like back in the day when I first started, I was like, yeah, 10 to 20 trade lines, but nowadays, 2025, things have really shifted. And we want to focus on quality trade lines and not crappy credit builders. Like we've talked about that before in the past. And those videos that talk about trade lines are almost ready. My video editor is almost done with them. So they're going to be inside of the classroom section, inside the credit community. So all of the replays are here. If you just scroll over to the classroom section, there's different topics here. And a lot of these have a lot of different videos. So if we click on personal credit, you'll see that there's multiple different videos in here, and everyone probably has like a different video topic, those type of things. Lots of credit repair training videos. These are all different videos, guys. So make sure that you really get in this classroom section when you're driving. Just listen in, when you have spare time, really listen in, because I talk a lot about, credit repair cloud training, credit repair business, credit trade lines, how to start the Turo business, the rental car business. So there's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of information on banks. There's the dispute letter library, funding. So it's all kind of categorized in here. And, just go through it when you guys get some spare time. But tonight we're going to be focusing on, what's working for credit repair, what's outdated, some of the things that we need to do, what are some of the things that nobody can help you with, right? If you've paid for credit repair in the past, can you put a 1 in the chat, please? Put a 1 in the chat for everyone who's paid for credit repair. I'm gonna be the first one to do it because I've certainly paid for credit repair. Okay, so I'm seeing some ones, so that's good. So, credit repair will only take you so far, right? What is credit repair, right? Credit repair is the art of sending dispute letters to the credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, along with sending dispute letters to the creditors, the banks, the financial institutions that are reporting that data to your credit reports, right? And credit repair is a very simple process. So if you sign up for credit repair with, say, Lexington Law or, one of these top, credit repair places, chances are they're going to probably send off some dispute letters for you. And you're probably going to start getting some notifications in the mail saying, hey, we got something on your behalf, but we don't think it was sent from you. And, I get that notice to myself when I send letters for myself. So it's like, I think we're all going to get that because that's how the credit bureaus are. They want to try to stall you. They don't really want to help you. So we're going to be talking about ways that we can work around that, because sometimes letters are just not enough, right? Their eOscar system may have already labeled you as credit repair, right? So one thing that I learned from an Experian rep that I had spoken with in the past was they will actually list people as someone that has potentially used credit repair, right? So if you've used credit repair in the past and they think that you used credit repair, you might be labeled as using credit repair in their system. So they're going to be more likely just to kind of ignore your dispute letters. So if you feel like you're not getting anywhere with the dispute letters, or you feel like, man, they're not even listing my account as disputed, what the heck is going on? I'm looking, I'm calling, they don't have anything under dispute. Chances are they're probably ignoring you. So you have to call in. We have to get a little bit more aggressive with these people. I've talked to a lot of people just in the past couple weeks alone where they've had accounts reinserted on their credit report, right? Or they've worked with a credit repair agency and some accounts were deleted and then they got added back in. And that's really frustrating. So that's why we want to try to do things the right way, the efficient way. And, collection accounts, those are a whole nother beast, right? Sometimes if you get those off, they can be sold to another collection agency and they can do the same thing. But, the strategy behind it all still remains the same, right? We want to try to get the negatives off as much as we possibly can, right? If you're worried about something coming and biting you in the butt in the future, it might just be best for you to settle it. And I know that's not what everyone wants to hear, but there's no shame in that. Okay. If the account is truly yours and you're like, yeah, this is my account, I've messed up with these people. At this point, I just want to pay it, right? There's no shame in that. Don't let anyone tell you it's not okay to pay a collection or it's not okay to pay an account that's on your credit report. That is so far from the truth. And in fact, sometimes, you taking that advice of not paying your account is, going to hold you back even further, especially if it's for, different situations. Like if you're going to go buy a house, a lot of times the mortgage industry can get around charge-offs, but they cannot really get around third-party collection accounts. So you're going to need to make sure all of those are resolved before you can, go and confidently apply for a home loan, right? But if you're going after business funding, then those charge-offs could quite be a problem for you and they might just get you denied. So we're going to be talking about, cleaning everything up because even if you pay for something, say you owe Credit One $300, right? If you settle with them for like 180 and they update the account to 0, that's great because it's no longer going to be essentially reporting every month as a negative. And you can still dispute that account's data to try to get it off of your credit report. They're no longer going to be actively saying like, hey, this belongs to you. It's like, well, we're not saying it doesn't, but we're saying that the data that's being reported on here, maybe it's the date of last payment or whatever data that is inconsistently or inaccurately being reported, we got to pinpoint those things. And sometimes it's best to call in. And I know a lot of us don't want to talk to anyone. We don't want to talk to the credit bureaus, but it is really important that we do so. So we're going to get into all of that tonight. We've got a good presentation here. Want to take a moment to welcome all the new members. We've had a lot of new people joining in. I've also seen people that have been here for a while. So thank you guys all for joining. I appreciate you all being here. I want to hear some wins. I've heard some recently from some of my clients that I've been working with for a while, but if you guys are on the call tonight, please come off of mute and share some of your wins with us here because I definitely want to hear it and then I can share some some. I thought I saw someone on here that shared a win with me recently, but let's see here. Manny, is that you?
Hey, Nicole. Yes,
Hi.
it's me.
All right, Manny. Do you want to share your recent wins?
Let me put it that way. I found you like a year ago on YouTube, and I was skeptical because there's a lot of people out there, they good marketer, but they really don't do what they promise, right?
Right.
You was the first one who I really, really feel comfortable paying anything.
Right. Yeah.
Back then, I was driving a truck. I was a
Mm-hmm.
truck driver. Long story short, today me and my wife, we have a credit repair company. We're
Nice.
doing very well. Now I got a CA Corvette, couple of new car, and we are about to move in a high-rise apartment that I
Wow.
always wanted to move in.
That is amazing. Great job, my friend. Great job. I love to.
Thank you. You really changed your life. Now I got time to spend with my kids, my wife. Don't have to go out for many weeks, and I'm really happy. Everything, thanks God and thanks.
We thank all that to you. We owe that to you.
Thank you guys so much. I love to hear these type of stories because, if you really put yourself out there to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Like there's so many other people out there that are successful doing this, right? Why can't I be that next person? That's exactly what we all have to have in our mind, right? Because when I was learning, I was listening to the Credit Dude. He was pretty popular back then. And of course, Daniel Rosen with Credit Repair Cloud. I was listening to all of his success stories and I'm listening to all these people's stories. And I'm like, wow, I'm sitting in traffic, driving an hour and a half in the Bay Area traffic. This is crazy, but it's inspiring because if they can do it, you can do it. And Manny and his wife are a prime example of that. They put their mind together, and they executed. They weren't scared. It is scary getting into any new business, right? But they took action. They studied, they learned, and then they started to earn. And it's literally life-changing. And it's life-changing for me as well, guys. But you just have to get started and stay consistent with it because a lot of people will get started and, there's always going to be hiccups and bumps across the roads, but you have to just keep on going and take those L's as learning lessons and continue to move forward. So that's amazing, Manny. Thank you and your wife so much for sharing that. Super motivating. So awesome. And then Claude, I think I saw you in here as well. Claude, if you want to come off mute and share a little of your story. He's been with us for a long time inside of the community, and Claude is one of those high-level action takers, and he executed at a high level, removing multiple bankruptcies. He had 3 bankruptcies. Claude, are you able to come off mute and share your story?
Yes, I'm here right here.
Oh,
Thank you,
hey,
Nicole.
buddy. How are you?
Doing fine. You know where I was when I first
Oh,
met you.
man. Yes, sir.
And you kept encouraging me and everything. But the strangest thing, on the last 2 public records, I was working with TransUnion, and believe it or not, the lady was speaking in broken English, and she took the last 2 off. There were 3.
Mm,
The third one went off, then the last 2. And I kept calling back. I called TransUnion that last week. I called them a total of 12 times. On
mm,
one Friday, I called 7 times, and the supervisor said to me, he said, "You keep calling." I said, "I have a right to keep calling." Because they said when you call, you get a special handling, then execute it to another level. Believe it or not, it's like a needle in a haystack. I got the same lady. I could understand in her voice who she was. And she said to me, she said, "You've had all these problems, and what I want to do is I'm going to give you a number. I'm going to give you a reference number. So if someone calls again and tries to pull this trick, you give that to them." Boy, they gave me a problem. But Nicole, since I met you, and I'm just telling everyone, I clean off from 3 credit bureaus. I cleaned everything off, and you
mm,
saw what my situation was, Nicole.
mm-hmm.
And everything you told me, from the credit cards that I had, going back and getting everything else off, I just took you at your word and said, if you keep working on it, you said it's gonna come off.
Mm-hmm.
And I start some days, I think it's like a broken record, but if I start at 9 o'clock, I started cataloging my times. And one day I started at 12:30, I quit at 6:30. That's going to 3
Like a
bureaus.
full-time job.
Is a full-time job, and they started listening to my voice. and they start picking up on it. But I can tell you, Nicole, thank you. And this month, it's the month for me to jump, because you told me, you said, you really don't know what's getting ready to happen to you. I got everything on 3 bureaus. So this month, when I schedule my time with you, then I'll just be planning on what we're going to do to execute for the month. But Nicole,
Yeah, that's amazing.
I want to thank you, because in less than a year, I took all of those options and started working on it. And I heard you say to me, because I want to just pay someone and walk away. And you said, look, you might pay someone or you might start talking, but you got to learn this stuff for yourself. What's going to happen when something happens again? You're not going to know how to fix it. I took you at your
Yeah.
word. And Nicole, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. Are you guys, am I echoing for you guys? Let me see. Okay, I think that's good. Claude had 3 bankruptcies. He had multiple late payments. We were able to clean up all of that. Like he said, it didn't happen overnight. And sometimes he had to make several phone calls and, get transferred to the fraud department and then get a manager on the phone with him to really get the help. And that's another thing that we're going to cover tonight is sometimes you have to become the customer to get help with these credit bureaus, because you will get that customer service that we all want from the credit bureau. Because when you become a customer with them and you're using their report to identify errors and all that good stuff, you can say, hey, look, I read when I signed up, I'm going to have personalized support to get all of this corrected. And I believe on TransUnion's website, it even says to this day, like if you've been a victim of identity theft, you're going to have a designated rep to help get this resolved, because it can be such a show for some people. And I know people that have legitimately been victims of identity theft and still have this crap on their credit and they're still dealing with it. And I've had everything under the sun done before, and it just seems like it's just never ending. So it's always good to become the customer so you can get that customer service. You're not late to the party. We just got started. We're just kind of going over some wins for people in here. Manny shared his success with starting a credit repair business. He was a truck driver. He was able to quit his job. Him and his wife are moving into their new high-rise apartment dream spot. Very successful. And then Claude shared his success on getting 3 bankruptcies on all 3 credit bureaus cleaned up, late payments on credit bureaus cleaned up. So a lot of positive stuff. But the bottom line is you have to take action. You can't expect this stuff to just go away easily. It's not as easy as we all like make it seem to be online, right? A lot of people, we're scrolling on social media. All we see on social media is the good, right? We're never going to see the bad unless it's somebody putting somebody else on blast, right? So we have to think, okay, well, this is a certain percentage of their clients. And I always look for dates. Like I want to see the recent stuff. And I see a lot of people still advertising from a year ago. And it's like, yeah, I don't care about that. I want to see what have you done recently, right? So the bottom line is we got to learn this stuff ourselves so we can take it into our own account and do it. Because I can't tell you how many times people, like I'll work with someone, I'll get them to where they need to be. And then like a year or 2 later, they'll come back. Like I had 2 people this week, I need your help again. It's like, gosh, I hate repeat customers, not in that way, but in the way of like, I feel disappointed because you're repeating history and like you need credit repair again. Like we have to stop the cycle, right? What is that cycle? Like we have to make sure that we're fully focused and committed to this as if it were a full-time job, because it is, right? And it affects so many eras and parts of our life. And, credit is truly a lifestyle, right? It's going to affect the type of vehicle that we drive, what our car payments are, what, where we live, how much we're paying for housing, and, whether or not we're getting approved for certain places. So it's a lifestyle, and we have to be able to walk that fine line and understand that even though credit is a lifestyle, we still have that payment at the end of the day, right? So if we're not able to fully commit to that payment long term, it's not something that we want to do, right? Because I have a lot of people that want to start rental car businesses and Airbnbs and, all these things. And that's great. I love it. I'm all for it. I'm all for generating more income off of credit, right? but you have to plan strategically, and you really have to do your market research, because if you buy a luxury vehicle off the bat for Turo, which I would never recommend to someone, you always want to start economy, right? You're still going to have that payment, whether it's in your business name or your personal name, you're still going to have that payment. So you're still going to need to commit to $1,000 minimum payment if you have a luxury vehicle, you know? So you have to really plan accordingly and just make sure that you are fully committed to this and focus on quality. You know, we don't want to focus on quantity. We don't want to focus on a bunch of these like credit builder accounts that we see online and that everyone advertises. Chances are they're probably advertising these credit builder accounts like Kickoff, Credit Strong, Selflender, because we have affiliate links for them. I have affiliate links for them. You know, I'm affiliates with all those places as well, but I don't really like them because what can they do for us in the future? Right? That's always what a relationship is about. And a relationship between a bank is, okay, maybe I'm down a little bit now, but you know, in the future, what benefit do you have? You know, Chime, zero. Self, zero. You know, you're always giving them money instead of, you know, the opposite. And that's not the type of relationship that I'm looking to be in with any sort of financial institution. You know, we want to get with the credit unions, the banks that are willing to really invest in their members, right? So thank you guys so much for the wins. We'll definitely have more of where those came from. Inside the credit community, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. Just make sure you guys are going inside of the classroom section, because this is where all the replays are. For example, if you go into the Tradelines, we're going to have a few more videos posted probably in the next few days. I'll have those videos edited and in there, and I'll start making posts about new videos that are posted in here. So inside the classroom, I also put a new series out for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. That's in here. And where is it at? Even I lose track of it all, right? Right here, CFPB. So if you click in here, each page has a different video. So definitely going through the classroom section. You can also go to the search bar up here and just type in keywords. Like if you're interested in business credit, you can type in business credit, and there's going to be community posts and classroom posts, right? But even with business credit, your personal credit is the foundation. I have so many people that come to me and say, oh, I want business credit. I want business credit. Okay, well, let me start asking some questions, right? Number one, what does your personal credit look like? And number two, what does your business look like, right? How long have you been around for? Are you making any revenue in your business? Do you have tax returns in your business? Are you truly a business making revenue, or are you just a person that wants to get business credit, right? Because there's a big difference there, and the banks know it now, all thanks to the PPP fraud stuff that we're still dealing with. And, you know, that's another reason why banks really tightened up, because they saw the amount of fraud that happened and the amount of people that simply went and bought a shelf corporation, called it a business, and falsified a lot of information to get funding, which, you know, people still do. Don't get me wrong, because you can still get funding, and you can get funding with no revenue, right, in your business. But you'll have to understand that there's still going to be payments. So you have to make sure that you can maintain those payments. But nonetheless, definitely go through the information that's in the classroom section. A little bit about me. I became a credit coach because of my own experience. I lost everything 2016, 2017. I actually just sent out like an email blast, I think last week, showing my credit score from 2016 at a 484, right? Very, very sad. Had no other streams of income. So once I lost my job, they went out of business. I was like having the hardest time. I was late on all my bills. You know, it would just everything, like the rug from beneath me was ripped from under me. And I didn't know what to do. I had never really done the whole unemployment thing. I was like, oh my God. And even when I did get unemployment, that's not going to do anything. I think it was like a few $100s a week when, you're used to making, over 100,000 to that's not going to do anything. Right. So ended up having to sell my home. I just remodeled my kitchen, put $50,000 into a brand new kitchen, and I lost everything. I put all my stuff in storage. Right. But storage has a bill too. So after a few months, I couldn't afford my storage units. I think I kept them for maybe close to a year or so before I finally had to say, let me just get what I need and let it go, because I just had to restart everything. And that's when I finally said, I'm literally going to start all over from scratch. I'm going to start from ground zero. And the first thing that I did was I went to Google and I Googled credit repair, and I signed up for Blue Sky Financial at $79 a month. And I had no idea what they were doing for me. I had no idea what credit repair really entailed. I had no idea about anything. All I knew was my credit was so trash. I had a little bit of cash, but even with me paying for a year up front in an apartment, I still couldn't get approved because my credit was such garbage. Funny fact, when I finally found housing, I had to manipulate my credit report to get approved. I'm really good with like graphics and stuff like that, right? So I had to copy, cut, and paste a credit report together for myself, because the guy was like, well, if you have a copy of your credit report, I can just use that. I was like, oh, absolutely, I'll send that right over. So I made the score a lot better than what it was, and I got housing because of that. But I'm thinking, like, I can't survive like this. This is like a once in a lifetime type of thing. And I knew I had to make a change. I knew that, after being with Blue Sky Financial, I think it was like 6 or 8 months, I was like, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm still like in the garbage with my credit, not getting anywhere. I still don't understand anything about nothing. So I was like, I'm going all in on learning this, and I'm going to perfect it. And I paid a lot of different people to learn from them, right? Some people I learned a lot from, some people not so much, but I put everything together so I can teach other people, because I had such a hard time learning from people. Nobody wanted to give me the information. It was like every little tiny piece of value they wanted to charge for. And I remember sitting in my job's parking lot. I had paid a gentleman that I, heard on a podcast, or I forgot how I learned about him, but he was in Florida and he had a credit repair business. And I'm like, I want to do this. So I paid $400. Mind you, I had no money at the time. I don't even know how I came up with $400 to speak to this guy for 15 minutes. But at that 15-minute mark, he was like done with the phone call. And out of that $400, like, he really didn't give me any information. He was just like, yeah, just do it, get a surety bond for $10K. And, I was like, oh my God. So that kind of made me think, okay, there's no quick fixes here. I really have to get in the trenches and learn. And that's exactly what I did. Every time I was in my car commuting to work and home, I was listening to training videos. I bought courses from a bunch of different people, and I would listen in. I would listen in on YouTube. And I finally just got like obsessed with it. And I said, I'm going to perfect all this, because with all these people out here talking about credit and business credit and blah, 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 I want to be able to give people the real life experience, whether they want to hear it or not, because this is the truth. Because everyone online made it seem like it was so easy and fast and no problem. We'll just do a credit sweep. I mean, I joined a bunch of different mentorships where they basically taught you to do identity theft with everything, right? And that doesn't work anymore. In this day and age, if you get something deleted or blocked, it can come back, and it can be reinserted into your credit report. And that's the last thing that we want, especially when we're going after funding. So I wanted to become that expert. I wanted to become that person that has the experience, that is going to keep it real with people, that's going to be a reliable resource for trade lines and everything, because I also bought trade lines. And the first trade line that I bought was like perfectly fine. I paid like $1,000 for it. So of course it was like really expensive. And I think I got ripped off a little bit, but I still did it, right? Because I knew I had to have that higher limit limit credit. I was stuck in that $500 approval range, super frustrating. And then I bought another trade line after the fact from the same lady, but it didn't post to my credit. And she was like, oh, well, if it didn't post, I'll give you a refund. Well, we all know how that story goes. I never got my refund and I never got a replacement. So I was like, man, I got to become that person, because if someone buys a trade line and they have an issue like this, $1,000 is a lot of money for someone to spend and not get what they paid for. So I became that person, and here we are today, right? 2025. I've been doing this now for close to 5 years. And when I first started, I was the one listening to everyone else on YouTube. And now 5 years later, I've been on Daniel Rosen's podcast and I did an interview with him. And, these were, podcasts that I was listening to when I was first starting and learning, right? I was listening to other people's stories. And here I am 5 years later, and I actually was a guest on his podcast right here. So I found that to be like super fun. It was a lot of fun. It was a cool experience. And it just kind of goes to show that if you stick with it, if you build it, they will come, right? I was talking to a few people earlier this week, and they were saying how, they watch my channel. They also watch like Credit Plug and like some of these other people. And it's like, wow, I'm starting to become in maybe that same range as those people, even though I don't have as many subscribers as he does or some of these other people. I give out more value than they do because I'm value focused, right? I'm not affiliate marketing focused. I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. I'm trying to teach you guys. And it does take time, right? It takes time to learn all this stuff. Sometimes I would have to replay things over and over until I finally had that switch go off in my head. It was like, I get it. Okay, I can move on to the next thing, right? And, credit, even though credit is, not going anywhere and has been around forever, it changes often, but the concept is always going to remain the same. So as long as you understand the fundamentals, the foundation, how to build it, how to get some of these things off your credit, how to correct these things, you're going to be set long term. And then you can also decide if you want to offer this as a service to help other people, right? And of course, we want to leverage the bank's money, OPM, right? Why would we want to use 20,000 in our savings account when we can use 20 to 50,000 from the bank, right? We definitely want to be leveraging our credit, although it's a fine line and we have to really do it strategically. There is nothing wrong with it. And you can certainly leverage your personal credit until you build up a solid foundation, and then you're able to kind of go on the business side. So I specialize in personal and business credit repair, cleaning up negative items, coaching, trade lines for personal and business credit, building credit strategies, funding and banking strategies. I don't charge my clients for like a success fee or percentage. I coach them on it and they keep 100% of their funds. I do have some people that offer funding services that I work with and they charge 10%. And if someone would prefer to do that, that's perfectly fine. However, I don't like that method because you're automatically in debt, right? It's better for you to learn because they're doing the same thing that you would be doing, except for you just took a little bit more time to develop your strategy behind it. What that strategy basically looks like is figuring out what banks you want to go to, right? Who they pull credit from, what credit products you're going to start with. For starters, we always want to start with credit cards, right? Credit cards are going to be the starter. They're not going to require documents or any sort of proof per se, right? Then once we kind of get that situated, we can move up to the business lines of credit or the lines of credit, the loans and things of that nature. But with it being 2025, when you get into the lines of credit, equipment financing, and bigger stuff, sometimes they require documents. So we're going to kind of talk about that in today's presentation as well, as like, what do we go after if we don't have documents, right? Because a lot of us that are starting out as small business owners, we are going to qualify for small business business credit, which is generally for those businesses that are making under 4 million. But credit cards, business credit cards, are really the only ones that don't have any documents or much financial records. You could still get autos and, some other things. Some banks out there, if you can find them, might give a business line of credit with minimal docs. Generally, you can get up to about 50K with no docs, unless you're dealing with someone at Chase, because they give out higher limits. At least they are right now, right? That could change, but Chase opened up the funding gates a couple years ago, and they're still going strong. So we're going to be talking about some strategies with Chase and how you can actually get higher limits with them, right? But trade lines are really going to be one of the biggest tools that we all want to learn about and leverage properly, because just based on like my experience and even a lot of my clients that I work with. For example, I was talking to a gentleman earlier this week. He is actually part of the community as well. And he was saying that, he was like, man, all of my business credit cards are like $4,000, no more than $5,000 credit limits, right? So when we started breaking everything down, and then I started going over his credit limits on his personal credit, that was the reason why. He did not have a credit limit over $5,000 on his personal credit. And when it comes to business credit cards, they're looking at your personal credit or the personal credit guarantor's profile, right? Not so much like the credit score, right? But the data points. I don't care, what my client's scores are. I want to look at the data. And to me, that's going to tell me everything that I need to know. And I guess he had spoke with someone at Chase, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. And they told him that he had too much personal credit on his credit profile. So he lowered his credit limits, which I would never recommend to someone, right? I don't know why they would tell him that, but he lowered his limits. And so that kind of like shot him in the foot. So now he's got all of these $3,000 to $4,000 credit cards that he's trying to get the limits raised on. But, if that were me and I were to do it all over again, I would just focus on a few quality, high limit trade lines on my personal credit, which I've never, ever heard a bank saying, you've got too much credit. I mean, I've got $250,000 in credit cards, just credit cards on my personal credit. And I stopped getting credit cards probably a year ago because I'm just done on the personal side. But I've never had a bank say, oh, you've got too much credit or your limits are too high, because your limits are going to be what the banks use on the business side to give comparables, right? So if you've got a bunch of $20,000 to $30,000 limits on the personal side, they're usually going to mimic that on the business side, right? That's the importance of comparables. Someone's got a question here. Let me see here. Your client was approved for 35K with Lightstream. They didn't have the guts to apply for the 50K. Will they ask for docs for 50K? Great question. They shouldn't ask for docs, but you just never know, right? I've had few different people that have gotten the Lightstream. They did not ask for any documents. I did have a client that got 100,000 from SoFi, and SoFi did ask for pay stubs. I happily provided him with those, and he was able to get approved for that. But it wasn't just, oh, they gave him 100K. He had comparable credit on his credit profile for him to get that 100,000. So, it wasn't like he just went from like a $10,000 to 100,000. We're also going to be talking about progression when it comes to credit tonight, and the importance of progression, because you're not going to just go from 0 to 100,000. You're not going to go from 10,000 to 100,000. You might go from like 70 to 100,000, right? But you have to think of it like the banks do, right? So when it comes to comparable credit, and this is really important for a lot of people that are working, to get a luxury vehicle that's a higher value, or has clients that's like, hey, I want to get $100,000 car, right? Well, if you haven't even had a $50,000 car that you've shown to pay on time, AKA comparable credit, what makes you think the bank's going to give you 100,000, right? Even if you've shown to manage a $50,000 auto loan, which is great, that's a, primary trade line, you would probably get about 70, 75, no more than maybe 80,000, right? That's going to be kind of like the step up from that, right? But your income also needs to be able to show that you can manage that type of payment. Because when you're looking at $100,000 auto loan, payments are probably going to be close to $2,000, right? Depending on the interest rate and all that good stuff. So you have to, think you're going to go into steps, 25 to then maybe, 45, 50, right? Almost double it sometimes, but each bank is different, right? So the best way to kind of go about it is to deal with the credit unions, because Navy Federal and a lot of these credit unions that specialize in auto loans, they're very giving in that sense. I've had quite a few people get like an $80,000 auto loan approval from Navy Federal, and that's based on them building their relationship up properly and then doing some higher limit pledge loans to kind of push that up there. So that's another way that you can add that comparable credit, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit tonight. Another question, does the client always have to have comparable for the auto loan? The client I worked with did have a 25K auto loan, but they should, right? So they don't have to have any auto loans that are necessarily paid off, right? But it always helps to have comparable credit, like they have had some form of installment loan, whether that was a student loan, a personal loan, auto loan, right? Some form of where they've paid an installment loan and then they've paid it off, right? Because if they don't have any sort of comparable credit, you probably won't get approved for more than 50,000, maybe even a little bit less than that. And if you did go through the approval process and you didn't have any comparable and they denied you for 50 or 60, then you want to call into the reconsideration line and say, hey, I applied for 60, but I didn't get approved. Can you see if you can run it through at maybe 47,500, right? I got the buyer to I got the seller to reduce the price, right? I actually had to do that with Navy Federal because when I got my third auto, now mind you, I have a really good auto history and comparables when it comes to the auto. But since this was my third vehicle, they wouldn't approve me for my initial requested amount, which I want to say it was like 60,000 or something ridiculous, something I didn't need, right? I just wanted to kind of see if I could push the envelope a little bit, but they said no. So I called in and I said, look, I just applied, but I think I can swing it with 30,000. Can you get me approved for 30? And they did. They were like, yeah, 30 went through, perfect, fine. So I ended up just going to the Navy Federal branch, picking up my check, and then I took it to CarMax to buy a Toyota Camry for Turo, which, was a great investment because no money out of pocket, no nothing. And it was like little over $400 a month for the auto payment. So every month Turo, paid for that. And it was a great thing. But yeah, Navy Federal is definitely the best. They rarely ask for any sort of proof. I've never been asked for any proof with the Navy. And I have had multiple auto loans with them. I've done a refinance auto loan with them, a new auto loan with them. I've done credit cards with them. And I've never been asked for anything. And I've never had any of my clients tell me that they've been asked for anything either. So they're usually pretty good about that. And then I can create pay stubs for people. Obviously my goal is to get them approved, but I also want to make sure that they're going to be able to manage everything properly. But generally it's just the places like SoFi, Lightstream that may ask for pay stubs. They could. I recently had another gentleman that I was working with, not necessarily for funding. He did all that himself just based on his own planning, but I did pay stubs for him and he was able to get about 200K in funding, but he did say some banks did not like use the pay stubs because they wanted bank statements. So it's like, in those cases, you're just going to have to say, okay, I just don't qualify, for some of these places. So banks are getting a little bit more, hip to things. And, when they do the bank statement verification, they actually want you to connect like via Plaid to verify everything, because he was like, well, should I get bank statements made? Which I've had a lot of clients do, but I tell them, no, it's just not worth it. I actually had a client that texts me all the time. He's not really a client. He's just someone that has a lot of questions that I've talked to a few times, right? But he is always reaching out, and he had someone make bank statements for him. And I told him, like, I think that was a waste of money, because I don't think that you're going to get approved for anything with just bank statements, because they want to connect via Plaid, especially the places that are like, little funding companies. A lot of these places are kind of hip to that kind of stuff. So they're not necessarily a great investment for somebody. Yeah, Navy's good. SoFi is good. And SoFi, if you have comparable credit, they were just a soft pull. It never resulted in a hard pull for my client that I worked with. They used his Experian credit report. So, and he also had a bank account with SoFi. So you can open up a bank account with them and kind of work on, building that relationship up as well for clients. Auto conversion, I wouldn't do it with Navy, because you don't want to damage your relationship with them. That was really the auto conversion play with Navy Federal was really popular about 5 years ago. Basically, you go pick up the check from Navy Federal for your auto. And then, if you know somebody that does like a dealership or has a dealer's license, they would deposit the money and then give you the cash for it. But it can get messy, and they will ask for the title. And if you don't submit it, they will then turn the loan into a personal loan. And the interest rate could also go up at that point. Now with Lightstream, they just put the money into ACH, the money right into your bank account. And if you don't turn the title in, I have not heard them, change the interest rate or make a fuss about it, really. So, and their interest rates are already a little bit higher. They're going to be much higher than like Navy Federal, right? Navy Federal is probably like prime interest rates out of all the places, but it's hard to convert their auto loans. I just wouldn't do that, because I don't want to damage the relationship with them, but I would try to go after their home improvement loan, which is comparable, and it goes up to $50,000. There is no way to apply online for their home improvement loan, and you don't have to own a home, no documents. Basically, they're going to be looking at, TransUnion for it, and you do have to call in or visit a branch to apply for the home improvement loan. And, they don't know if you own a home or not. You can just say you do, right? Not all homes that you own are going to be on your dang credit report. You might have a family trust home or something, right? And just say it's for solar, okay? Because solar can be very expensive, and say, look, I've talked to a solar company. They came by, they gave me a quote. Their quote was a little high. So I wanted to call you guys and see if you can, give me a better deal. And that's exactly what I did with a client with USAA, and they did a $50,000 personal loan. So USAA is also another really good bank for loans, credit cards. They don't have a business side, just like PenFed doesn't have a business side, but they're great on the personal side to kind of give you, some comparables, some higher limits. I always tell people, you can really get creative. If you get a personal loan for $50,000, you can really get creative with that $50,000. You can turn that same $50,000 into multiple primary trade lines by saying, okay, I'm going to take this $50,000. I'm going to do a $50,000 pledge loan with Navy, maybe take that same $50K, do a pledge loan with another credit union. There's so many of them out there. You can do one with PenFed. You can do one with DCU. The only thing is, you just want to make sure that you'll have access to those funds, because DCU is changing a bit. There's a lot of changes going on right now, like Capital One and Discover are merging, right? So I'm hoping that Discover doesn't pull from all three like Capital One does, but we'll see what happens. First Tech and DCU, they are merging. So, DCU is a known Equifax bank and First Tech is an Experian bank. So we'll kind of see what these new changes bring upon us. But there's so many different credit unions out there that do the secured loan, pledge loan play. And, if you're in a different state, like I'm in California, there's a lot of local credit unions like San Diego County Credit Union that does pledge loans. Navy Federal is just like the most well-known bank that does them. So DCU is very generous. But like I said, with the merges, I've kind of noticed that when banks do merges, they get kind of stingy and they don't want to give out anything because, they're still kind of going through some changes. And this is, kind of a telltale sign because Discover a few years ago, they stopped doing like credit limit increases. And it was like, okay, what's going on here? Because even inside of Capital One, you can request a credit limit increase through the app. Well, now it kind of explains why, because Discover was getting ready to merge. And I've noticed that with other banks, when they're merging and kind of going through some changes, they don't really want to give out a whole lot until that is done and settled in. So I don't know that I would necessarily recommend banks that are going through big changes like that when we're strategically building for funding and stuff like that. I'd probably stick with the ones that, top credit unions based on like iBankNet, right? These are going to be our top guys that we want to go to. Why? Because look at their assets here, right? We're looking for the banks that got the big bag. And right now that is Navy Federal for sure. But we've got the top 10 credit unions based on deposits and assets right here. So these are some great options. State Employees Credit Union is going to be number one. Schools, PenFed, which is Pentagon Federal Credit Union, Boeing. And this is what I always tell people. We are seeking credit unions that specialize in people, right? Specialize in service members, veterans, police, fire, teachers. These are the ones that we want to go to. Teachers Federal Credit Union. You don't have to be a teacher to get into these places like Navy Federal. It's for maybe teachers and their families and some, right? But finding a way to get in these credit unions that specialize in their members, those are the ones that we want to really get in with and build the relationship and focus on 5 or more banking products and really, invest in them because we want them to invest in us. But you'll notice like Navy Fed, they specialize in service members, right? Schools First, teachers, right? Boeing, they specialize in like the airport folks or like the planes, right? Golden One, they're like, California, but you'll see a lot of these that specialize in people, right? Police and Fire Federal Credit Union, Teachers Federal Credit Union. Those are the places that we really want to build with because they want to heavily invest in their members. Yes, so we do have primary trade lines. Unfortunately, they only report to TransUnion at this time, but for some people, it might be worth the investment. So we'll get to the primary trade lines. I've got a whole slide on that, and we'll kind of go over that. Recently had a revolving added to your client's profile for $35K. Yeah, so it's good for comparable credit. You just want to kind of like whenever you're adding fresh trade lines, especially when they're primary, you want to kind of add them before you're going to go and apply for funding, because usually when they get added, they're going to have maybe like a 30% balance or so. And we can't, like, I know with us, even on the business side, we can't like reduce it more than what what the payments are. I had one person on the business side that wanted to zero it out, but we had to close it, right? So you don't want to do that either. So you want to just kind of add the primary trade line before like 6 months prior in some cases, because you want to let it report and you want to allow that debt balance to kind of come down and be as low as possible, because it is going to affect your debt to income ratio, right? Even if you had a pledge loan that you did with Navy Federal or another credit union, if you did a $50,000 pledge loan, whatever that balance is, it's going to be on your credit report affecting your debt to income. So that's why a lot of us that add the pledge loans, will pay it down 80-90% after like 30 days or so, just leave a small 10% balance. Okay, so let's get into the credit profile, because like I said earlier, it's not about credit score, right? Credit scores always look nice. Woohoo, 800 credit score, 700 credit score, right? But at the end of the day, that might be on Credit Karma, which is a Vantage score, right? But if we look on Experian, which is a FICO version that we're seeing on the Experian app, FICO 8, you might see a whole nother, score. So that's why I don't get excited when I see credit scores. I get excited when I see the data on the credit reports, right? Because what we're focused on is data, right? Paying the bills on time. Every single credit account that is on your credit profile, we need to make sure it is paid on time. That is priority number one, okay? If you cannot commit to this like a full-time job, please don't get the credit builders, because I see a lot of people that get Credit Strong and they get Self-Lender and they get a late payment on there. And that is so damaging, right? Just so damaging. I've seen people that have gotten secured credit cards and get a late payment on there, or they'll get a secured credit card and then close it a couple months later because they need the funds back, right? So we really have to think this strategically long-term, like at least a year, and say, hey, can I commit to this, right? If not, just don't even do it, right? That's why I never recommend people doing secured credit cards for larger amounts. Do a secured loan instead, right? Hopefully by you doing the secured loan, you can bypass the secured credit card, especially with the credit unions like Navy Federal. Like I cringe when someone has the secured credit card from Navy Federal, because I'm like, oh man, you could have bypassed that by doing the secured loan, taking your time, building up things a little bit further, and then just trying to bypass that whole secured process, because I feel like it's just a waste. I've had a couple clients that like they have booked calls with me, 15-minute calls, and then they went through the process to see if they were approved. And one lady was like, oh, well, I got approved for like a secured card. I was like, honestly, I would not even accept it. I would just say no. And I would do a secured loan instead and wait a few months, wait for, you to clear up some things, get your data points right, make sure that all that data is updated, and then try again through the pre-approval process. But that payment history is going to be super important. That is the number one thing that we have to focus on, is every credit account has to be paid on time, right? Payment history is 35% of your credit score, and nobody else can control that but you. So it's really important that you turn those, auto pays on. You make sure that that bill is paid. You put it in your calendar. You have reminders set, because you're not going to get a late payment if you're a day late, if you're 2 days late. You're going to get hit with a late fee, right? Which is very expensive and just unnecessary, right? But you will get reported as late once you are 30 days past the due date. And I had a client recently that I was working with, and it's so discouraging for me working with someone that gets a late payment, because we had came so far. We were doing so good. I had added him to an authorized user. His credit was like 700. And then he got a 30-day late payment with Capital One. And it's just like, oh my gosh, and they're super hard to get off of a open credit card, especially on an open credit card that's maxed out. And it's easy to max out a $300 credit card, so you have to be very careful and make sure that you really set yourself up to not get any late payments. And if for some reason you are going through a financial hardship and you're not sure if you're going to be able to pay on time, call the bank and see what they can do for you. Borrow money from somebody, because the long-term effects of a late payment payment are going to outweigh and just continue to haunt you for years to come. So it's really important that we get this, embedded in our brain. We have to pay these credit accounts on time, even if it's the minimum amount due. That's fine, right? Even if we have to work some other things around, like, hey, maybe, I had some unexpected expenses this month. Maybe I can call my car company and see if they can defer my car payment to the end of my loan cycle so I can use that money to pay my credit cards, but all those things we have to make sure that we're planning, and, hopefully you can get into like a cycle where it's not so hard anymore, bringing on extra income. We really got to take this credit stuff serious, because it can make you or it can break you, right? Utilization. So this is calculated with just credit cards and lines of credit, revolving credit accounts, right? So, and that's on the personal side. So if you have student loans, installment loans, personal loans, those type of credit accounts are not calculated inside of your credit utilization. So we can hold debt with a personal loan, a home improvement loan, any sort of loan. We can hold that a lot better on our credit debt than we can with credit card balances, right? Credit cards are, 30%. That's the usage is 30% of our credit score. So if you have a $20,000 credit limit, sometimes it gets really exciting. Like, oh my God, I got $20,000, right? I'm going to go blow it all. Well, we still got to pay it back, right? So don't get too happy. But this should be used as a tool, right? A long-term tool. And I've helped a lot of people get these $20,000 credit cards with Navy Federal, which is usually like the highest limit that they ever gotten. And I've seen a lot of people destroy it. And it's like heartbreaking, because it's like, man, you're not thinking long-term here. You could have added your kids as an authorized user to that and helped them get a 700 credit score by the time they're 18. But instead, you ran it up and you didn't pay it off, right? So now you've completely burned your bridge with Navy Federal, because they're one of those banks that if you don't pay 100% of it back, you can never go back to them for credit in the future. Like Chase, you can settle with them and you can go back, right? But Navy, no way. They are much harder. So they have a lot of benefit, but it's like $20,000 credit card to them is a drop in the bucket. So don't let that be, what you hang yourself with. It's just not worth it. We have to think of the bigger picture here, and we could get, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future if we play our cards right. But we have to understand how to play this game of credit, right? We have to understand the credit usage on a $20,000 credit card still gives us a lot of wiggle room, right? So even at 20,000, everyone says, oh, keep your credit usage under 30%. 30% is way too high, right? So the goal for us, if we really want to fully optimize our credit profile, especially if you're going after funding, you want to keep it under 10%. Preferably under 5%, and you only want to have a balance on one credit card. And I know sometimes it can be hard for people because they have these like credit builder accounts that for some reason always have like a small balance reported, $8 or something weird, right? But if we want to have all but one credit card at a zero balance, and that fully updated on our credit report before we go and apply for funding. So under 9%, perfectly fine. But if you have gotten yourself into a little bit of credit card debt and you're closer to like that 30 or 50% range, either you need to bring in more income and pay it down. I know it sounds easy, right? Or you might want to consider getting a personal loan to kind of restructure the debt, right? And that's what I had to do with the client that got the 100K from SoFi. We had to use a portion of that to pay off his credit cards. So his credit score went up to an 800, and then he was able to qualify for more credit on the business side. He was able to get a $50,000 US bank credit card, 0% interest for 12 months. And that's because we had to restructure some things on his personal credit. His personal credit, when he first came to me, was like a little over 700. He had a solid profile, but we just had to restructure some things around because he let his credit balances get a little too high. You can still hold the debt perfectly fine, but sometimes, when you get that percentage closer to like 40 or 50%, it's like, okay, let's just get a personal loan and pay off the credit cards to zero, and then just kind of like chill out on the credit card spending and focus on paying down the loans. Which banks are the hardest to get back with after a charge off? So let me just make sure I understand this question. Which banks are the hardest to get back with after you have like a bad debt with them? Is that what you're asking? So for example, if like you had Chase back in the day and you didn't pay them, okay, cool. So I actually had that situation happen to me. So I, like, when I said I had the worst credit, I made sure I just outdid everyone, right? So I had Chase and I settled with them, and I was able to go back about 4 years later. So it took me, after I had paid the account to zero, and I think I owed them a few $1,000s, and I ended up being able to settle with them for like $2,800. And I did a payment plan with them, right? And they told me, hey, we're going to do this payment plan for you, but if you miss one payment, it's over with and we're not going to accept this. So I paid it as agreed. I think I did like a 6-month payment plan with them. And when I finally had my account at zero, it took me about 4 years to get back into their good grace. And now I have like a $17,000 credit card with them on the personal side, and then like 20 something on the business side. So you can definitely go back to them if you settle. Now with Navy Federal, they are a bit different. You would not be able to settle with them if you ever want to go back to them in the future. So that's one thing that you would have to consider with each bank, because each bank is a little bit different. As far as I know right now, Navy Federal is really the only one that is a real stickler like that, to where if you don't pay them 100% back, they will not give you funding in the future. So, you would just have to kind of see, well, if it's Citibank, if I settle with them, can I go back in the future? Yeah, you definitely can, right? So with the credit unions, they're probably going to be a little bit different, but you just need to ask them like, hey, if I settle this account with you for, maybe 30% or 60% or whatever that percentage looks like, am I going to be able to come back to you in the future for more funding? And Navy Federal will tell you straight up, no, if you do a settlement, you'll never be able to come back and get funding with us in the future. But Chase is different, so it takes some years. It can take probably less than 4 years, but that was my personal experience with Chase, was about 4 years. I've heard people that they said it was like 2 years, right? Capital One is probably less, because Capital One kind of specializes in people with lower credits. They give lower limits and things of that nature. So, but it can be a couple years for sure. Did you have a particular bank that you were asking for, or a credit union? And then another question was with regard to the comparable credit. Oh, American Express. Yeah. So American Express is a stickler as well. I've had a few people that have had them, and they've done settlements with them, and they were able to go back like within like a year, because they have like a second chance program in there. So they want to give more credit to people that have like shown and proved that, hey, I made a mistake and I've owned up to it, right? But like other banks, it can be like a year or two. American Express can be a lot quicker though, because they have, a card that's kind of meant for like, hey, you're kind of on probation. Let's kind of see how this thing goes, right? But I would pay it off and then probably try to go back in a year, as long as your Experian credit score is over 700. I've had people that have had right under 700 get denied, and right over 700 get approved. I've also heard some people that had a lower credit score, like a 680, get approved, but I really think that was because they just had some like, strong data points, but maybe just think their credit usage a little high, which brought their credit score down. So you can definitely try, the good thing with American Express is you can go through the pre-approval process on, is this going to be for the business side or the personal side? Okay, I'm not sure if it's business or personal, but in my experience, it's been easier to go and get the business credit cards after you've had some like turmoil with American Express. You can also get added as an authorized user to kind of get back in their, system. But yeah, it's going to be at least like a year with them. Personal and business. Okay. Yeah, I would say just pay it off. I don't know that I would try to go after like another personal card with him, maybe just on the business side, just because, it's a little bit, better, I would say. And if you do get approved on the business side or on the personal side, you want to just keep on applying, because generally you can get up to like 5 cards with American Express back to back. That's exactly what I did. You just keep on applying right on their app until they finally tell you like, hey, you got to call in and verify, because we're not sure we're not sure if this is really you or not. But I got 4 cards that way. And oops, hold on. I got the Blue Cash, Blue Business, the Plum, and the green card. I got all 4 with one sitting, right? And they finally said, hey, you got to call in. And then the next day I said, I didn't get the card that I really wanted. I wanted the gold card. So the next day I called in and I got the gold card. But it was another hard inquiry. All 4 cards that I applied for in one sitting, those were all the same inquiry. So I got 4 cards with one inquiry, and then the next one when I called in over the phone, that was another hard inquiry, but I got both of those off, so it's no big deal. And that was on Experian. So with American Express, I would actually speak to them and say, look, here's my goal with you guys, right? I went through a financial hardship, but I don't agree to all these charges and everything, but I want to settle this whole thing up, right? And I want to come back to you in the future, and I want to be able to get, my business credit cards with you because I travel a lot and blah, 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 right? And let them know what your intentions are with them. So that way, number 1, they can notate your account, and number 2, obviously give you the best advice for your situation. Because, with a settlement with them, they should still be okay with giving you future credit, right? I've had a lot of people that have done that and paid it, and they went back in like a year or 2. But let them know your intentions and see, what they recommend for you. I would say a settlement option would probably be best with American Express, just because say you owe them, $10,000. I'm not sure if they've already sent you settlement offers in your email or mail or whatnot. Usually, you could probably get a settlement 50% or maybe even less. And you can just call them and negotiate a settlement offer for them. And if you're like, okay, I'm not getting where I want to go, like get a manager or a supervisor on the phone. Sometimes they'll make you submit a settlement offer request to them and say, hey, I allegedly owe you this X amount of dollars, but I disagree with it because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. But I'm willing to offer you a settlement of, X amount of dollars, and maybe like a one-time payment, right? If you're going to make negotiations, making a one-time payment to them is going to be a better, outcome for you, but you just have to be prepared to follow through with that, right? So in the settlement, you're going to write your terms, and you're going to say, if you accept this offer, payment will be remitted within, 15 business days or whatever the case may be. But you have to have all of that in writing for them. But I would definitely contact them and see, what they suggest for you, because depending on a few situations, they might say, hey, well, if you want to come back to us in the next year, we might just recommend that you pay all of this. But if it's a large debt, it might not be feasible. So figure out what's going to be best for you and see if you can do a settlement with them, and that way you can go back to them in the future. Okay, so I'm going to have to get through the presentation before I get to your guys' questions. A lot of great questions here. Last question I'm going to be able to take right now. If you have a 720 credit score on TransUnion, but I have a couple late payments from 2022, can I still run the Lightstream Play? Yes, you can. Were the late payments from a credit card or an installment loan? Auto loan. What bank was the auto loan with? It's closed now. Okay. Have you tried to dispute that account, not to get the account removed, but to try to get the late payments on it corrected with TransUnion? Because that ultimately would be the best thing that, in a perfect world, right? What we would want to do is keep that trade line, but get TransUnion to correct that late payment reported from 2022, right? One way that you can do this, and sometimes it takes a little bit of back and forth and follow up. Is you get a letter from the creditor, whoever the auto loan is with, right? You write them a goodwill adjustment letter, and you write the CEO of the company, and you email them and you write them a formal letter, because our goal is to try to get a letter back from them in the mail with their letterhead on it and the account information and all that good stuff, right? And whether they say, yes, we'll provide you with an adjustment, or no, we won't provide you with an adjustment, we could potentially take that letter and scan it into our computer, and then we can modify that letter to make it say what we need it to say. It's not ethical, right? But in some cases, like, it's not hurting anybody. It's not going to hurt them, right? Because what the credit bureaus are telling us is, hey, if this is inaccurate, if you just give us a letter from the creditor, we'll fix it for you. And that's what we want to do, right? So the way that we can go about this is with TransUnion. You can sign up for their free account, and you can dispute that account online and then upload the proof, right? In this case, we would need that letter from the bank saying that they've provided the goodwill adjustment, or that, oh yeah, this report from 2022 was in fact inaccurate and we've actually updated it to paid as agreed, right? If we can get something that says that, and then we can submit it to TransUnion and then follow up with a phone call like, hey, TransUnion, I got the letter from the bank saying that this payment was inaccurate and they've updated it to paid as agreed. I need you to update this as to paid as agreed, because this is affecting my credit and, getting me denied for things, and it's inaccurately reported. That would be ideal, right? Now, it is from 2022, so that's well over 2 years ago. It could still get you approved for something because you don't owe them a balance. But if we could fully optimize beforehand, I think you can get more money from Lightstream. You could probably, how much was that auto loan for? The amount of that auto loan initially? Okay. Well, while you're looking at that, we could go about 20 to 25K over what that, primary credit limit was, because of the fact that that comparable credit, we can usually go about 20, 25K, and that's our progression. That's how we step up from that. Okay. But back to the profile data points, payment history, super important. Credit utilization, super important. Now, the difference between the two, right? This is 65% of your credit score. And nobody has control over this but you. Nobody can fix this but you. And this is over half of how our credit is calculated, right? So that tells us a lot. Number one, we got to pay our bills on time. Number two, if we have a late payment, it can affect us for years to come. So just try to avoid it. There's ways that we can correct late payments, but they are the hardest thing to correct. There's a gentleman on YouTube, and I've had a lot of his clients that I've worked with, and he talks about how late payments are illegal to be reported. And that is the furthest thing from the truth I've ever heard. Late payments can absolutely be reported. And if they have proof that you were 30 days past the due date, they can be reported. And they are so terribly hard to get, corrected or deleted, right? So we really have to make sure that we handle with care, right? Now, credit utilization, it can change, right? Sometimes we might take a hit because we had some bigger expenses. We had to buy some tires, whatever the case may be, right? That can change from month to month, right? But if you're in a pickle where you're like, okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay this, like kind of down below 10% in the next few months, you might want to consider just taking out a personal loan to offset that and bring your credit score back up, right? But it just kind of all depends, because if you apply for a new account, it's going to bring your age down, which gets us to credit age. That's 15% of our credit score. And the more that we apply for new accounts, our age keeps dropping because it goes off of an average, right? And this is why I always tell people the student loans are not a bad thing, especially if they don't have any late payments, because student loans are generally one of the first credit accounts that are added to our credit profile. So what they have is age. So if you have student loans that have 15 years of age, and then you've got these new accounts, you're going to kind of get that combined age, which might give you 5 years, which is exactly where we want to go, right? And you want to have enough credit mixture, right? What is the mixture? Different types of credit accounts, revolving, which are our lines of credit and our credit cards, and then our installments, auto loans, personal loans, home improvement loans, any sort of installment loan where we pay the same amount every single month. If you are buying furniture, please listen to this, guys. Never buy furniture on a credit card, right? I know a lot of furniture places out there like Beck's Furniture and some of these other furniture stores, they'll give you a store credit card to purchase your furniture. Please don't ever use a store credit card. If we're going to finance furniture, we have to finance it using an installment loan, okay? An installment loan. Even if it's like, I'm not a huge fan of like Klarna and Affirm and all those places, but they're installment loans. So they're not going to affect your credit usage like a furniture store credit card would. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that I used to do is I loved buying furniture. So I had a $5,000 furniture store credit card and I would go max that thing off several times a year, not knowing I'm shooting myself in the foot. And this is why my credit's not getting over 700 because I've got a maxed out store credit card, right? So yeah, if you're financing, make sure that it's an installment loan, not a revolving account or not a store credit card. So the auto loan was with Exeter Finance and it was for $11,000. So you probably would not want to ask for more than 50,000 just because you don't have, you're not quite at that progression level yet. And even if they don't give you 50,000, if they say no, you can call into the reconsideration line and try to go after 30,000, right? Usually it's about 20 to 30,000 above what that limit was. So, for 11,000, if we add 30, you're looking at about 40, right? 47,500 is not an unreasonable amount for an auto loan. So I would say that's good because even if you do plan to use Lightstream to buy a vehicle, you don't need to spend all of that funding on just one vehicle, right? Buy a vehicle that is dependable and it's going to last you a long time and it's going to be low on maintenance because I'll tell you what, I have two cars. I have a Dodge Charger or a Challenger, something like that. I have a Dodge four-door car, right? And then I have a Mercedes. And the Mercedes is super expensive for maintenance and everything that it does. And my Dodge is like super low maintenance, like breeze. I have never had issues with it. It's been a great, reliable car. Yeah. Okay. So 50K, I would say about 47.5, just to kind of make it on that realistic tip there. And, if you can get that late payment corrected, that would give you that 47.5. I would have a lot more confidence with that number without those late payments. So if you can, right after this call or tomorrow, put on your to-do list and check it off as done. Hey, I need to write the Exeter Finance, and you can go on to Elliott, or you can just go to Google, to be honest, but Elliott.org. This is a company that will provide you with different CEO information for different places. So company contacts, and you can just type in Exeter right here or Exeter. I forgot how you spell their name, but let me see if I can. I think they are auto. They've changed their website a little bit here. Exeter. Let me see if they have it on here. I don't think this is the right area. Hold on a second. Auto sales. No, it's definitely Elliott.org, but I want to find their company contacts and then credit. Sometimes they're not in the right section here, but I don't know if they have it on here. Like this one, you can see they have some of the major ones. And if you guys did not know, the credit card that GM Financial had, which was underwritten by Goldman Sachs, that card has actually been discontinued and now it's being underwritten by Barclays. So that card is no more. So it doesn't look like it's on Elliott, but this is a great resource to get, CEO information, because say if you wanted to reach out to American Express, sometimes they'll have an email address, right here. You'll sometimes find a separate address, right here you have some email addresses for their primary contacts. So this is pretty good information, but you can also just do like a Google, which if you just go to 𝒂𝒐𝒐 Finance CEO, and I like to kind of like cross off all of my T's and email them, plus do a certified mail return receipt, because I'm looking to get a letter back in the mail from them, like a response, not just a phone call from the CEO's assistant, right? So Jason Grubb is their CEO right now, and this is why I love Google, because you can go into LinkedIn, try to send him a message on there, and you can also try to just go email, right? Just put in right there. Customer service email is, generic. That's not necessarily what we're looking for. But sometimes if you do like a Google search, you'll be able to find what their email or what their email address is, what the CEO's email address is. And maybe if I put in his name, but you definitely want to try to reach out to him. Let's see, for Jason Grubb. And sometimes you can find it on the CEO email. Here it is right here. CEOemail.com is also another really good resource to find their contact information. But this is Jason's email address right here. You want to send him a nice, letter and, make it heartfelt. Let him know what you went through. Let him know that, you are in the process of trying to finance a home for your family, and that this late payment, which was like a one-off situation, is really holding you back. So you are asking them to provide a one-time courtesy goodwill adjustment to update the late payment to paid as agreed. Updating to paid as agreed is the magic word, right? And then we're looking for a letter back from them, because we can modify the letter to really kind of say what we want. Again, not ethical, but sometimes we have to do what we have to do. It's not hurting anyone. You don't owe them money. I feel like, these are small little things that make a huge difference for us, and like nothing for them. Like we don't owe them any money, right? So it's not going to hurt them any if we, kind of finagle some, make it in our best interest, right? But we have to learn a serious lesson. Like I cannot get a late payment moving forward. I have to make sure that I'm fully committed to paying things on time. I know things happen, and, sometimes, things happen, right? Life's unknown sometimes, but there's still opportunity to kind of like call them and figure out what they can do for us. A lot of times they can defer the payments to the end of our loan cycle, right? If you've made, consistent on-time payments to them, and you're like, hey, school starting, or, something happened. I had to buy all 4 tires. I don't know what happened. My fence blew down. Something happened. I had a huge unexpected financial bill that came up. Can I please defer 1 to 2, maybe even 3 car payments to the end of my loan cycle? And sometimes they'll do that and they'll push it out, and it has no effect to your credit. So it's actually like a positive, and they'll be able to do that for you. So yeah, altering the letter is like a game changer, guys. Like I've done it for a lot of people, and sometimes it takes a few submissions and uploading it online, and then, calling in to speak to a representative saying, hey, I've mailed this letter to you, certified mail return receipt. I know you fuckers got it because I got the proof. I've uploaded it to you guys. What more do you need from me? Because I've talked to you. I've talked to a supervisor. You need to talk to supervisors. You need to get them involved and say, look, I've sent you everything that you need, but for some reason you're not updating. I don't want you to remove this account from my profile. I need you to update this late payment from whatever month it was. You have to be very specific when you're speaking to them and say, you are reporting a late payment in, July of 2022. I need this late payment from July of 2022 either removed or updated to paid as agreed, because I have the proof right here from the bank saying that they made a little error. If it's already closed, it's totally fine. You can get it removed, but we don't want to get it removed because it's a positive trade line, right? And we can use that positive trade line to have as comparable credit, because if we don't have that trade line at all, I mean, it wouldn't be there to even have a starting point, right? So I feel like even though it's only 11,000, it's still, a good comparable credit trade line to have on your credit saying, hey, I've had this, so now I'm ready for a $40,000 or $50,000 trade line. So yeah, we definitely want to just get them to update the payment to paid as agreed and just be very specific with them when calling in and trying to get it that way. Because although I think you could probably still get approved for it, I would say you're just going to have a much better time, and it might not even affect your credit score at all, right? But the data is the most important, right? The data. So back to our profile, the credit mix, want to have a little bit of everything to show them, hey, we can manage installment loans, we can manage credit cards, we can manage any type of credit account. It's no problem, right? And then, of course, inquiries and new accounts are 10%, what our credit score is as well. So every time we open up a new account, we're going to get an inquiry on our credit report, right? And we all know that if we have, more than maybe 4, 5, 6 inquiries, 6 is probably going to get you denied for credit cards, right? But if you have a lot, that could get you denied just based on the amount of inquiries that you have. Even though the accounts are still new, the accounts are still on your profile, and you should totally have an inquiry from them, we can get those inquiries removed. I don't have any inquiries hardly at all on my credit profile. And if I were to have kept all the inquiries from the last 2 years, I'd probably have, 7 to 10 on each bureau. But, the thing is, especially on the business side, they don't know that you have that account. Or if it's on the personal side and it's not on your credit report, they don't know. So it's not going to be the end of the world. You can call them to get the inquiries removed. You can send in dispute letters. You cannot dispute inquiries online. That's the only downside about the inquiries, is they do not allow you to select them to be disputed online. So the easiest way is just to call right into the credit bureau, become a customer with the credit bureau. So if you're dealing with TransUnion, pay for the TransUnion credit monitoring and say, hey, I'm a new customer with you guys. I just got my report, and boy, I was looking at it and there are some errors on here. I have a couple inquiries that I did not authorize and I need them removed immediately. Call into customer service. Don't explain the situation to them, but just say, hey, I'm a new member here. I need to speak to somebody in your fraud department. Have them transfer you on over to the fraud department. Once you get fraud department on the phone and have verified that you are speaking to the fraud department, hey, I need to speak with the manager. I need to speak with the supervisor, please. And then get that supervisor on the phone and then explain the situation to them, that you have a few unauthorized inquiries that you just saw on your credit reports because you just became a customer with them, and give them the name and the date exactly how it is listed on your credit report, and they should be able to get those taken off for you. If they give you any blah, blue blah, baloney about, hey, have you called the creditor? Yes, of course I have called the creditor, and they told me there was absolutely nothing that they can do. They have no record of this, and that I actually need to call you. So I've already done that. Have you filed an FTC report? Yes, I have, and I've already sent that to you guys. It's in the mail on the way, right? But you don't really need to do all of that stuff, right? But whatever they're saying, have you done this? Have you done that? Yes, of course I've done that, right? And they are always going to try to make it seem like it's not their fault. You got to do this, or we can't do that. That's why you want to get those managers on the phone, or those supervisors, because you got to let them know, hey, listen, I'm not your average consumer. I know my rights as a consumer, and there was no permissible purpose that was provided to anybody to run my credit. Therefore, I am demanding that you remove this unauthorized data from my credit report. And you can use that same verbiage for really anything on your credit report, right? Because it's unauthorized data. And that's exactly what credit is all about. It's our adult report card, right? So the credit factors are right here. Now, this is from Credit Karma, and this is actually my screenshot from today. I took a quick screenshot of my credit factors, but you'll see here, everything that's in green is good to go, and everything that's in yellow or red means, hey, we can use a little bit of work, right? So even though my average credit age is 5 years and 3 months, every time I had added new credit, I was just tanking down my age. Now, one thing that I could do to increase my age would be to add, aged authorized user accounts to my credit profile if it was that important to me, but it's just not, right? I'm willing to just wait it out, and everything else is good to go. 1% credit usage, no derogatory marks, right? That means no collections, no charge-offs, nothing like that. Total accounts, I have 43. That's excessive, right? One person does not need 43 credit accounts. Not all of those are opened either, but I was just on like a credit kick for a while. So I probably have over 20 credit cards, which is excessive. And I don't ever recommend anyone get that many credit cards on their personal credit. I would focus on 4 to 6 quality credit cards on your personal credit, 2 to 4 installment loans from quality banks and well-known institutions that other financial institutions can, use, right? Because they're like, hey, if Bank of America can trust you with, $30,000, $40,000 credit cards, so can we, right? And that's why it's really amazing when you can get into Navy Federal, because they're known for giving out those high limits, right? So they kind of get that party kicked off and say, oh, sure, we'll give you a $25,000, credit card by simply you just doing a few things that are inside of the Navy Federal Guide, which is opening up a bank account with them, right? And focusing on getting 5 or more banking products: checking account, savings account, high yield savings account, overdraft protection, pledge loan, right? Secured loan. Those type of banking products really helps your internal score with Navy Federal. Also CD accounts, right? If you have $1,000 to spare, do a CD account, certificate of deposit, for 12 months, earn yourself a little bit of money, build a little nest egg for yourself. The banks love CD accounts too. So things to consider: settling. Okay, I know everyone talks about don't pay collections, don't pay things that are on your credit report, get everything swept off with our identity theft sweep. Newsflash, that shit doesn't work for everyone, okay? And it's not valid for everyone, right? And not everyone is going to be okay with just doing identity theft sweeps or, these other sweeps that these people are showing online, like, hey, I got everything deleted from this person's profile in 3 days. Well, guess what? In the next 30 days, they're all probably going to come back, So it's totally okay to settle accounts, especially if you feel like they're holding you back, right? It's okay to settle accounts, especially if you want to return to them in the future. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. If you want to go back to American Express, if you want to go back to Chase, you are going to have to pay them, right? Just a quick story of someone that I had, worked with. It wasn't my client, but it was one of my clients' clients, if that makes sense, right? So I was working with a coaching client, and she was working with this individual, and they had a Chase account and it went south. The Chase account was not on their credit report, right? So they thought in their mind, since this Chase account is not on my credit report, I can just go back to Chase and apply for credit with Chase. Wrong. So wrong. Okay. All of these banks have internal data and their own internal systems that they use, and all of it's connected via social security number. So of course it's going to come up in their system, even if it's not on your credit report. So it could still get you denied. And in fact, I was working with a person and they had really good credit. I think it was like 780. It was very, very high, right? And we went through the American Express application and they were denied. And I was so puzzled. I was like, man, what is going on here? And then I got into the login and I started looking at the letters as to why they were denied. And it said pending litigation. And I said, what is this pending litigation stuff? Oh, well, I'm actually going through court with them because I am a victim of identity theft and somebody used my identity to open up a bunch of American Express credit cards. So I'm going to court with them right now. I said, well, that would have been really important to tell me prior, because you're not going to get approved for anything with them if you're currently in a litigation because of that situation, so you really have to be careful. people don't tell the whole story sometimes, but all these banks have internal data, so you're not going to be able to get past it, right? But settling things that are holding you back is okay, because they're going to update it to a zero balance, and then you can still dispute the data and try to get that data removed from your credit report. People think, well, if I'm settling it, like, it's going to go away, right? Because I could just pay for it to be deleted. That's not how it works. Pay for deletions only work with third-party collection accounts, and not all third-party collection accounts will do that. A lot of the utility ones will, like the cell phone, the electric bills and things of that nature. But and they don't want to call it that, right? Because you can't really make negotiations with them like that. But they'll say, well, once it's paid, it'll be removed as if it never existed. But with the original creditor, that's completely different. Original creditors are not going to delete the account from your credit profile. They will update it to a zero balance. They'll update it to settled. They'll make notes on it, small, but just let the bureaus know that it's paid, settled, whatever. And then you can continue to dispute it, but you're going to have to continue to, just stay on top of it until you get the results desired. And sometimes once you've paid it, it doesn't really show as negative. I've had some people where they've disputed it very strategically, and they've had the status updated to paid. They've had the payment history wiped out, and the trade line is still remaining on their credit profile, right? Very hard to do that. Some people would much rather just get the account deleted and not have to worry about it, right? But, if sometimes we need those trade lines as comparable credit, it might be worth salvaging that account. It just kind of all depends on the data and how it reports on your credit profile. The best time to add trade lines, so if you're adding authorized user trade lines to strategically apply for credit so you can get higher limit approvals, boost your credit score, you want to do this when you have at least one credit bureau that is free and clear of any derogatory accounts or any negatives, right? Even if you just have Experian clean, there's a ton of banks that are only going to pull from Experian, and you could even freeze Equifax and TransUnion if you were worried about it, right? Because depending on the location and depending on the credit type, credit product, sometimes banks that are known to pull Experian, like Chase, I've had Chase where they are starting to pull from Experian and TransUnion in certain states, like Florida. I've seen that. And you can just freeze, the TransUnion if you had something that was negative on there that you didn't want them to see, right? But you don't want to add trade lines too soon. You don't want to add trade lines when you still have some work to do. Like I had a client that I worked with a few years ago that wants to come back and get help. And he's like, oh, well, I might just need a few authorized user accounts and call it a day. And I looked at his credit reports and I'm like, you have 5 negative accounts. You don't want to, we can't just, try to sweep under the rug and put the dirt right over it. Like that doesn't make any sense. We need to clean up those things first, or as many of those things as we possibly can. That may even entail you having to pay some of these things that just simply won't go away, but it just kind of depends. The charge-offs are the biggest factor when it comes to paying them off, especially with the major banks, Chase, American Express, Cap One, Credit One. A lot of them you can just settle with. Call them, settle, and update to zero balance, and then continue to dispute, right? But the fundamental truth about funding is that the banks, they don't care about the credit score, right? They fund credit profiles. They don't fund credit scores. When have you ever gone to a bank and they're advertising, get approved with a 700 credit score, get a brand new auto with a 700 credit score? Never. Right? Never. And the reason behind that is it doesn't matter what your credit score is, right? Some people might have a strong credit profile, but only have a, 680 credit score because they're not educated on how to properly kind of, set everything up like I wasn't, I had too much debt from furniture store cards, but we have to focus on those data points. That's why a lot of people get denied funding is because they're like, well, yeah, I've updated everything, I've paid everything off, but has it updated on your credit report, right? Because that's where we're all reading the data from. If it hasn't updated there, unfortunately, it's just like a waiting game. We have to wait for those things to update and for us to be fully optimized data wise, right? Community banks and credit unions look a lot beyond the score. They're better to build relationships with, especially if you can get in with like 𝑪𝒓𝒆𝒅𝒊𝒕. They fund bad credit as long as you build up your, relationship with them the right way. Get the account, wait 90 days, at least 3 billing cycles before you apply for anything. And just during that, first 90 days, just date them, get multiple banking products with them, 5 or more, overdraft protection. If you can do a small direct deposit, that helps. Although when I was getting approved for all of my credit products with 𝑪𝒓𝒆𝒅, I did not have direct deposit. I didn't even barely use my bank account with them. And I was still approved because I had done, multiple pledge loans, CD accounts. I always have like a CD account going with them. So those are the type of things that banks really, really like. You will shoot yourself in the foot if you get overdrafts with these banks that you're working to build a relationship with. And that's why it's so important to either, not use the bank account like that, or, be very strategic about it and make sure that you have, overdraft protection set up. So if for some reason your account does go negative, it can just pull from your savings account, so it covers everything. But even that is going to like set off some triggers, right? So you don't want that type of smoke from the banks. You want to show them that, you don't even really drop below like $50, right? Because that's kind of like, hey, you're getting a little low there. I mean, you never know if there's going to be like fees and things. So you definitely want to just make sure that you have all that stuff set up properly. And I've even had some people that have applied for pledge loans, the secured loans, and have gotten denied because they had recent overdrafts in their bank account. So you can get denied for a pledge loan by having overdrafts and, risky behavior inside of your banking. But the bottom line is you got to be funding ready, right? You got to make sure that you understand what the banks are looking for, right? They're looking at all that data from the top to the bottom. So you got to look at it and analyze it as if you were the bank, from the personal information all the way down to the inquiries. We want one name, one address. We want less than 3 inquiries, and we want all of the data clean and cleared up, right? So let's talk about the repair phase, right? Dating personal information, just like I said, using the Experian backdoor method. I have a video inside of the community. If you just type in Experian, you'll be able to bring up that video where I show you how to log in and get the personal data cleared up off of Experian pretty easily. And you can dispute personal data online with TransUnion and Equifax as well. But sometimes it's just a little easier if you call in over the phone. A lot of times they're going to want proof documents, right? So you're going to need to send them photo ID that's not expired, like state driver's license or identification card, and proof of address. So proof of address needs to be dated within the last 30 days, utility bill, insurance statement, any sort of like utility or statement, right? It needs to have all 4 corners and clearly be able to see like the logo, the dates, your name, all that good stuff. And then if you want to go a step further, sending in a copy of your social security card. So that way they can verify your identity and say, okay, you are who we say you are. And you can upload those things online as well. A lot of times when you're going through and selecting the items to dispute, you'll notice they have like a little upload section where you can upload supporting documents. And that's where you want to upload your proof documents and any other supporting information that you may have, like a letter from the creditor or whatever, right? But definitely just getting that party started. Calling in over the phone, like Claude had shared earlier. He treated this like a full-time job, calling in sometimes 7 times in a day. But guess what? He got the results, right? He became a customer and he got the results. Calling in is one of the most efficient and effective ways that you could possibly repair your credit, because you're actually speaking to someone that's physically in your account working on it, versus sending a letter in and hoping that their eOscar system would properly process process your dispute, right? But getting that, more aggressive approach is going to get you faster results for sure, right? And even then, you just never know how fast the credit bureaus are truly going to work. So it could take a while to get every credit report cleaned up because they're all separate. Just because TransUnion deleted it doesn't mean that Experian is going to. So that's, another tricky thing. I had another client I was working with this week where they had a charge off that was previously deleted come back on Experian, right? And when that charge off came off, it raised his credit over 100 points, right? And then Experian added it back in. And I told him, you need to call in and you need to let them know that that data is fraudulent and it was removed because it's fraudulent and they did not give you any notice when they reinserted it back onto your credit profile, and they need to remove it again for good. And they actually removed it. He sent me a message, I think it was either this morning or yesterday morning, and said the charge off is now gone, right? So sometimes it takes those phone calls saying, hey, look, no, you're violating the law. There's no way that you can reinsert this into my credit profile because number one, you didn't give me any notice. And number two, the data on it is fraudulent. You've already agreed that the data is fraudulent because you've already removed it once. And then you reinserted it without giving any notice. No, that's totally illegal. And they ended up taking it off again. So I was very, very thankful for that. So now he's actually ready for funding because that was the last little tiny piece that was a part of the pie that we had to be corrected. A few other minor things, but that was the biggest piece. Those charge-offs are just challenging sometimes, right? But, going through your credit reports with a fine-tooth comb. And I always recommend, if you're first starting out, get your credit reports directly with Experian, directly with Equifax, directly with TransUnion. Pay them for your credit reports. Become a customer with them so you get better service with them. And that way you can have reps that will help you because, hey, I'm a customer. I should have a dedicated rep that is helping me resolve these issues because there's data on my report that is invalid or inaccurate, whatever the case you may want to use, right? But getting those things off of your credit, right? And, even though at the end of the day, we could say it's fraudulent, that doesn't mean I've been a victim of identity theft, right? It can be fraudulent data, fraudulent information. You could have gone through like a data breach. That's a really good method to use is the whole data breach thing, especially if you have any sort of proof that your information was leaked in a data breach. There was the Equifax data breach. There's been so many other data breaches that you could potentially use to your advantage. A lot of people have had really good success with the whole data breach thing, but just staying on top of it, right? Sometimes you have to get aggressive. You have to make those phone calls and you have to let them know, I do not agree with you. I need to speak with a supervisor because they're always going to try to tell you whatever they can to get you off the phone. So getting those negatives cleared up, and it's not always as easy as, we want it to be, of course. If it was that easy, everyone would have perfect credit, right? But that's why we're all here because we're going to apply ourselves, we're going to take action, and we're going to go through the motions. Just like Claude said, he had to go through the motions for it to fully happen. And now he's fully clean and it feels great, right? And then rebuild. He's in the rebuild phase right now where we're going to be starting to add those trade lines and figure out what's the best resources for him. Now, you've all heard of these trade lines, which are, Credit Strong, Self Lender, Kickoff. They're all helpful for building credit, right? But they're not going to be helpful for getting funding. All right. So if you are looking to get funding, skip those. We're looking for, what are banks looking for? They're looking for other banks that are their competitors, right? So even if you have a secured credit card from Bank of America, that's better than nothing, right? I would much rather someone have a little dinky secured credit card, like a $500 secured credit card from Bank of America or, one of these other banks and use that versus like a Kickoff or Credit Strong. Only time that I really like Credit Strong is for someone that needs to add higher comparable credit for installment loans. They are helpful with that regard because you can get a very high amount. They have up to like $30,000 right now, right? And they also have the business trade lines that report to, I want to say, Experian and 𝒓𝒊𝒕 and Equifax. They just don't report to Dun & Bradstreet. So they have the business ones that are great for comparable high limits, and they have the personal ones. The personal ones are more of like a savings account. So you pay into it and then you can cancel at any time. So keep it for 6 months. But if you're going to have a $30,000 trade line, that payment every month is going to be closer to like $300 or $400 because that's what a payment of that caliber would truly look like. So if you're having a hard time paying that and committing to that every single month, it might not be a good idea to get an actual, installment loan that you're going to be responsible for paying that amount for the next 7 years, right? But it can be helpful with that type of credit with regard to Credit Strong, and it reports to all three, right? Some of these type of rebuilders, they don't report to all three credit bureaus. So it's like, like rent reporters, they only go to Equifax and TransUnion. They don't report to Experian. And that's why if someone is going to report their rent, use BoomPay. BoomPay is like $25, I think. And, maybe a few more dollars to report the last 24 months, but they report to all three credit bureaus, and there's no landlord involvement as long as you have your rental agreement and they can validate those payments like on your bank account. Then they'll add your rent to your credit report, and then you can add authorized users, right? We want to look for authorized users that have a perfect payment history, which all of mine do, and then they have a credit utilization less than 15%, as low as possible. I did have a situation this month where someone got one of my trade lines and the card holder was trying to like raise their limits because it was like an $8,000 card. The usage was like close to 40%. So we gave the client an extra month on that card for free because the card holder had already paid it down to 0, but unfortunately it had already reported. And you have to be careful with that. When you are trying to raise your limits, you got to make sure that your balance is paid about 5 business days prior to the end of the billing cycle. So there's enough time for it to update and all that good stuff. But, the goal is to clean, build, add aged accounts. The only way that you can really add aged primary account right now is like, rent, or if you buy an aged trade line, which we'll go over that in just a second. But credit report tips: call, ask for help. That's one of my favorite. Call and speak to the fraud department, speak with the manager, use the data directly from their credit reports. We kind of talked about that already. Use their dispute forms. So every reporting agency out there has their own dispute forms. So for example, if you just type in, a lot of this is already inside of the community as well, but if you type in Experian dispute form, it's going to bring up this dispute form right here, which is a PDF. If you go to page 2, this is their dispute form that their systems are trained to process. All right. So this is all that you need. You don't need a fancy letter, stating all the laws. Just to keep it simple, do a form like this. And every bureau has these forms. Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, they all have their own individual forms that you can just fill out and send it on into them. And you just need to make sure that when you do send it in, you have included a copy of, your driver's license, your social security card, and proof of address. And basically, this is what they're saying right here as well. You can also use the online disputing systems. TransUnion is service.transunion.com, and it's free to sign up for all of these, right? But like I said, if you want better service, you will pay for their little service for the time that you're actually going through the process, right? So the only downside to the online with TransUnion is if you already have a dispute open with them, they're not going to let you open up an additional dispute online. So that's the only downside about it. But cool thing about TransUnion is they actually have a chat box on their website, right? And it's during like normal business hours, so it's not going to be available like right now, but tomorrow it'll be, Monday. So you'll see the little chat box on their website, and you can chat with a representative right there on their website, right? You can also chat with someone on the social media sites. I've actually chatted with someone on TransUnion for a client just to kind of test it out, and the account was deleted like within 3 days. Even though they're like, yeah, we'll process it, it was gone. So, try it out, see if it works. Sometimes it's always good to try all of these different ways, even though they all take time. It's well worth the time, because if this data was to just sit on your profile, it would cost you a whole lot more than that, right? But even with their online system, make sure you send them your ID, proof of address, and a copy of your social security card. And then something that I actually kind of learned by just self-experience is your location affects the credit approvals, right? So I used to live in like a not so nice area, and the credit approvals when I lived there were like, oh, that's not that great, right? And it was an apartment as well. And then when I moved into a house, into a nicer neighborhood, I started getting approvals like everything was approved. And I did research on it. And sure enough, that makes a big deal. So if you have family members that live in a higher income area that actually live in a home, like a house, a residential single family home, you might want to consider using their address to use as your address for funding. So I have like a friend, and her mother lives in a nicer city in a home, and she uses her mom's address to get funding, and she doesn't have any issues. So you might want to just see how you can make that work for you and leverage other people's, higher income neighborhoods and, situations. The only thing that you'd have to get is proof of address, which, you can change your address on your cell phone company bill and use that, right? It would definitely work. And your address on your ID does not have to match either. It's really just for identification purposes. But never put self-employed on a credit application either, guys. Even if you are self-employed, or, you are an owner of your business and your business employs you, you always want to put that you are a full-time employee. I have a client, and he does ride share, right? So, and deliveries and things of that nature. But you never want to put that you're an Uber driver or a Lyft driver on a credit application, because that's high risk to them. So instead, you have your business, you have your LLC, you are employed full-time by your business. So you want to put down your business name, and you are a full-time employee. You don't want to put that you're the CEO. You just want to put that you're, the operations manager, or, some sort of manager, director, right? Those are titles that are still high level income titles. Director, director of events, operations manager, still very high level job titles, and could very well be over, 300,000 as far as the income goes. So you always want to kind of just pay attention to those little tiny things. Let's see, Manny, there's a couple questions in here. Magnum installment loan, that's good. Yep, the Magnum installment loan's like $30K, and it does help with comparable credit, and it's kind of like a savings account. So with Credit Strong, and I've had a love-hate relationship with Credit Strong, and over the years, I feel like they have been pretty solid, and they just keep getting better and better, right? So just to kind of say, I would not get the revolving account with them, because that could count against your 524 rule with Chase. Installment loans are not always counted in against that 524 rule with Chase. They could probably look past like a Credit Strong installment account opened, right? So if you go to the CS Max, it goes up to 30K, and they have lower ones, right? But if you're looking for high limit comparable credit, you definitely want to go like, go hard or go home, right? They have these lower ones, which like this is $1,000. These are the installments. The CX Max, this one goes up to 10,000, but where's their other one? I think it's the Magnum. That's what they call it now. So the Magnum plan is the one that we really want because this one goes up to $30,000. So the Magnum XL is a $30,000 trade line, right? The monthly payment is $350. Now, this is all going to come back to you because it's like a savings account, right? You are going to have a $25 non-refundable administration fee, which is fine. And it's not going to be a hard credit pull. So that's good. And it's going to report as a primary trade line as I think Austin Capital or, some other, it's not going to say Credit Strong. And it will be a $30,000 trade line. So I always recommend, doing something like this, keeping it open for, 6 to 12 months. And then once you cancel it, the balance will be updated to a zero balance and you can cancel it at any time, right? So this definitely is going to help with comparable credit, right? And if you're like, man, $350 is like a lot. I'm not trying to pay $350 a month for this trade line, even though it's kind of like a savings account and they're not going to just keep your money. You're going to get all that back and you can cancel at any time without penalty and all that good stuff. They still have a $15,000 trade line that you can do for $175 a month. And then they have the $10,000 for $125. $10,000 is still a pretty good amount, right? So you have some options here. And then you could do like $5K, which, if you're going to do $5K, you might as well just do the $10K, I would say. But this is one of my favorite credit builder accounts just because you can get up to a $30,000. And this is really going to help, especially if you want to get, a $50,000 or $80,000 auto loan. You're going to need to be able to show some comparables, which this is a great comparable because it's only going to be $350 a month. And then, you can cancel it after 6 months. And once you cancel it after 6 months, it's kind of just going to show as if you paid off a $30,000 installment loan, So in today's world of credit, building relationships with the right banks and credit unions is going to be the key to unlocking funding, right? Because a lot of banks are a little bit more skeptical, a little bit, tightening up and not as loosey-goosey as they used to be. They're really looking for comparable credit, right? What type of credit accounts have you had in the past that you were able to manage? Because if you haven't even shown to manage a $10,000 installment loan, what makes you think we're going to give you a $100,000 loan, right? You have to have comparable credit and you have to show progression. You're not going to just go from 0 to 100, right? And I see people do this all the time with trade lines and adding, primary trade lines to either their personal or their business. They go from like nothing to like 100,000. And it's just not believable because no bank out there is going to just give you 100,000 if you haven't even shown to be able to manage 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. So you have to kind of think like the bank, are you going to be comfortable lending somebody 50,000 if they never have shown any other comparable credit, right? You have to kind of look at it in that manner and understand that there are levels to this, right? And over time, you're going to grow those levels up, right? And what are some of the solutions for getting there a little bit quicker? Like, because we want to focus on quality, not quantity, right? I would much rather have 6 quality, credit cards versus like 10 credit cards with like kickoff and like all these other credit builder accounts that no one cares about, right? So ask for a credit limit increase every 6 months from your current credit accounts. Funny enough, I don't even use like my PayPal line of credit, which I guess is now being transferred to my PayPal credit card. Good, right? They just gave me a credit limit increase of like $800. So I think the credit limit now is like 6 or 8,000, something like that, right? But I don't even use it. And sometimes they'll just automatically give me a credit limit increase. But you can also call in or go onto the app and ask them for a credit limit increase. In some cases, it might be worth calling in to request the credit limit increase. Let me explain why, right? So for example, Navy Federal, right? Navy Federal will give you up to $80,000 in unsecured credit revolving credit, right? Their flagship card, the black card, it's a signature card. It goes up to 80,000. The other cards, they generally go up to about 40,000, right? So you could get up to 3 credit cards with them, but if you want to strategize this, I would just get 2 credit cards, right? So if they only start you off with 25,000 off the bat, hey, I'll take it, right? Let me just work this card, spend, pay, use this card as if it were my debit card, put all my spend on here so they can see that I'm spending and I'm paying, I'm spending and I'm paying. And I pay this thing off every week, right? And then I call in after 6 months and I ask them for a credit limit increase, because on the app, we used to be able to put how much we wanted, right? If I have 25 and I want 35, I want a $10,000 increase, I can no longer put that on the app. It is going to automatically just give me what it gives, right? There's no hard credit pull for that inside of the app either. So that's like the bonus, right? But the trade-off is if I call in and speak to a rep, it's going to be a hard credit pull. However, I can tell the rep, hey, rep, I want to have my credit limit increased to 40,000 or 35,000. Whereas in the app, it's not going to allow me to give them a credit limit. And if they can increase it to 30 or 40,000 with a phone call and a hard inquiry that I can get off, it's well worth it. I'm going to consider that a win. Okay. Military to get into Navy Federal. Yes, there is. I'm going to put in the community, the Navy Federal guide. And if you just type in Navy Federal script, it'll give you the script on how to join. Basically, you just say that your father or brother was in the service, was in the Navy, and they had Navy Federal and they spoke really highly of it. But unfortunately, they're no longer here and now you want to get a bank account with them. So that's how pretty much everybody, gets into Navy Federal, is just by saying that they had their father that was in the service and that they passed away. You can also get a membership ID number. That's really risky. People sell them. I would never buy one from somebody. I would just call in and say that your father or brother was in the service and that they passed away. And if they ask for their, sorry, I don't have it because, they passed away. My video and audio keep going out. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, just use the guide and get in there. I was speaking to somebody on last week sometime, maybe Friday, but I was speaking to him and he did not have Navy Federal. I gave him the script and he joined like after we got off the call. They're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can call in literally anytime and join. And he's like, yeah, I'm a Navy Federal member now. And all he said was that his father was in the Navy and his father passed away. And now he wants to join because he was reading on their website that, if his father was served, then it would qualify him for membership. So definitely do that because they are going to be, one of the ones that give out the higher limits, and they're going to open up doors for other financial institutions. Because like I was working with one of my clients and she's a business owner, so she really needed higher limit credit cards. So we were able to get her, I think it was 20 or 25,000 from Navy Federal. And the way that we did it was basically we cleaned up her credit. We added 2 high limit authorized user credit cards. Of course, joined Navy Federal. We did a pledge loan, which is a secured loan. She did a secured loan for I think like 20,000 with Navy Federal. And we paid that down. After she paid that down to like 80%, and the Tradelines posted. Mind you, you don't want to apply for anything with them until you've been with them for 3 billing cycles, right? So as soon as she signed up with them, got the pledge loan, started working on the relationship stuff, we added the Tradelines. And then once those Tradelines hit, she applied with Navy Federal for the green cash rewards card late at night. And then she was approved for 25,000. And then we basically used that high limit credit card to kind of piggyback off and went to Chase. And then Chase approved her, I think, for like 18,000, which she was a little disappointed with because she was hoping to get 25, just like Navy. But, that's pretty good on the personal side because, normally they're not going to give out that high of a limit especially nowadays, and she doesn't have any relationship with them either. So no checking account. And that's the great thing about Chase, US Bank, Bank of America. You don't need to have a relationship with these banks to apply for their credit products. American Express, all those guys, you really just have to build up your profile properly and have those comparable credit lines on there. So that way they will not, have any issue giving you the same thing. And she even had the banker surprised, like, wow, yeah, I don't normally see these higher amounts, but if you build your profile the right way, it's not going to be a problem, and that's the great thing is you'll understand how to do this now because we all talked about it. You spent the time to learn and then you earned because you got to learn this information. The banks aren't going to tell you this. I mean, I couldn't believe when my client that I was speaking to last week told me that Chase told him to lower his credit limits. I was like, oh my God, why would you do that? Like, I know you wanted the Chase card, but it basically sets you up to get all these low limit approvals from here on out, So it just, sometimes you don't always want to do exactly what the banks say. You can go to another Chase branch and deal with someone completely different. And I can guarantee you that they would not tell you to lower your credit limits. Like that is just like crazy to me. But, now it's like, okay, game on. Learned from that very expensive lesson. Now you're going to focus on raising up those credit limits, adding those high limit comparable authorized user trade lines. You guys all get $100 discount per trade line. American Express trade lines do not report history, right? So they're great for adding high limits. They're great for getting you into an American Express database. They're also great for offsetting a little of your utilization. So I had a client and they had about a 30% utilization, but we added like a 46,000 Amex card, brought that utilization right under 10%. So that's kind of the positive of it. But if you're someone that also has a kind of a thin history, you're also going to want to add a, aged trade line, something 10 years or older, which, might be a little pricey, but these are for 3-month terms. Other trade line companies are usually just for like either 45 days or maybe 2 months. So with mine, you'll have 3 full months and we guarantee everything to post. Many people in here have already gotten the trade lines, get a lot of trade lines from me for their clients as well, because you got to have those comparables to help get you, those higher limits that we're all looking for. Credit limit reallocation. This is a huge hack, guys. Huge, huge hack. Okay. If you don't remember anything from this call, remember this. Okay. Some banks, not all. Ow, I got a cramp. I've been sitting down for so long. Some banks will allow you to reallocate your credit limits from one card to another. Generally, it's just from like personal to personal, right? But Chase will allow you to do credit limit reallocations from personal to business, business to personal, personal to personal, business to business. That's a huge play because you could literally get 0% interest credit cards, or you can get higher limit credit cards with Chase, right? Because Chase will generally let you get like 3 credit cards total. Some people will have more, but the great thing about it is you can move those credit limits around. So say they give you 20,000 on a travel card, and then maybe you didn't know any better and you got like 5,000 on like an Amazon card. You can combine those, right? You're like, well, forget this Amazon card. I'm just going to reallocate this 5,000 from this Amazon all over to my travel card. So now I have one card that has, maybe 30,000 limit now. And then in another 6 months to a year, you can apply for another credit product with them, another credit card. Maybe they give you another 30,000. Great. Now I'm going to move that 30,000 over to this card again. So now I have one $60,000 credit card, right? I always like to transfer the limits to the oldest card and keep the history, right? Some people, they don't always do it that way, right? Because if you're doing it on the business side, who cares? On the business side, you could take advantage of the 0% interest, right? So say, for example, you have a business credit card with them, 16, 17,000. You go and get a $30,000, $40,000 business credit card with them for 0% interest. You can reallocate your credit limits from the other card all over onto the 0% interest card. So now you have, whatever, it's 30 plus 30, say 60,000. So that's a huge hack that you can really leverage to your benefit, which is that credit reallocation. Bank of America does it as well. Yes, they do. And I don't believe they let you do it from personal to business. I believe you have to stay in the same lane, business, personal versus Chase. You can lane change over there. You just have to be, strategic about it. And I've had a few clients that we've combined cards because it's much better to, get those high limits versus having all these different credit cards for, little low amounts, right? So definitely take advantage of that. I'm not sure exactly why I have this little scribbling on my screen, but yeah, okay. But yeah, credit reallocation is very cool. I love it. Avoid closing your oldest card on your personal side though, because it will affect your credit age. So if you are doing credit reallocation on the personal side, I would reallocate to the oldest card so you can keep your history unless there's some other strategic plan behind it, like 0% interest or something like that, right? Let me see if I can get this like pausing off of here or this drawing. I don't know what happened, but that's so weird. And the annotate, I guess it's called. Let me see if I can stop sharing and share it again because that is bothering me. Sorry, guys. Is there someone in the waiting area? Let me check here. Are you guys still with me though? You guys are picking up what I'm putting down? Give me some feedback. Give me some feedback. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Yes. All right. Great. I love it. Love it. Okay. Let me take a quick break real fast. I'm going to get a water because I have a cramp. I was working out this morning and I need to get a water. So let's take a couple-minute break for us to get some water, use the restroom real fast, and then we will wrap this whole thing up and I'll have the replay out for you guys this week. So let's take a quick break and I'll be back in about 3 to 5 minutes, guys. Okay, I'm back. Claude, you're asking about the Magnum plan. I would do it, to be honest with you. I'll send you a link. I'll also put my referral link inside the credit community because I'm an affiliate with Credit Strong. So it doesn't cost you guys anything, but they give me like, I don't know, a little few dollars or something if you guys sign up using my link. But it's definitely a really good comparable credit because it's, a $30,000 primary trade line and it's an installment, right? But you can add authorized users for the revolving side. Yeah, it kind of depends on like your plan, right? You don't necessarily want to have this Credit Strong account open when you're applying for funding like that would be affected by your debt to income ratio, right? So like, for example, if you're applying for credit cards, your debt to income ratio is not going to be a huge factor, right? But if you're applying for another auto loan or another sort of installment loan, if you're applying for a home loan, this is definitely going to be, a big problem. So you want to keep it for as long as possible. So 6 months minimum, I would say, but the longer that you can keep it to show that ability to pay on time, the better, right? 6 to 12 months is optimal. 24 months is like even better, right? Because you're showing the longevity, the history that banks really, feel confident with. They're like, hey, yeah, if you can pay this for 2 years straight with no late payments, like that's going to give them more confidence in you, right? So the longer the better. That's why with the pledge loans, like the secured loans, I say the same thing. Like obviously they're a little bit more tricky because you're using your own money, right? So a lot of people don't have $30,000 sitting around that they could just throw at a pledge loan, which is why a lot of people will go after like a personal loan that's a higher value and use the personal funds to do their secured loan, right? Will it apply? Will it affect? Yes, it will affect because that is going to be a brand new opened account. So if your goal is to apply for Lightstream or SoFi, I would probably hold off on the Credit Strong one because it's going to be a brand new account. So it's going to look like you just took out a $30,000 loan to the naked eye, right? Yeah, that's the downside. Because like when you're building up your profile, it's really great for that. But if you're gonna want to get funding pretty soon, then you might want to just hold off on it and then maybe use Credit Strong like in your downtime where you're like, okay, I've applied. Now I'm just gonna like garden and like, take a break from applying for like 6 months. You could definitely do this during that time. And then once you close the account, it will update to a zero balance. So it'll be like a paid off account. Yeah, so once you close it or shut it down, it will be 100% paid off, zero balance. So that way it'll basically show that you basically just paid off a $30,000 installment loan. Yeah, so that's the positive about it. Okay, so let's get into the rest of this. Focus on quality high limit trade lines, right? 4 to 6 revolving credit trade lines, revolving credit cards, lines of credit. You're going to get higher credit limits with certain credit cards, right? Signature cards. Okay. Signature. That's the word that we are all looking for when it comes to travel cards that we're like, hey, I want to get a higher limit. Why signature? Because they are signature cards and they are known for giving out a high limit. So even for like Navy Federal flagship card, let me just show you guys real fast so the green cash rewards card, this is their green card right here. This is the first card that I always have my clients go after because it's got a great entry offer. And this card usually goes up to like 40,000. In fact, I have this card and I want to say my credit limit on this card is 40,000. And then my flagship is like 38.5. And you can only go to 80. So I messed up and I got 3 cards, but I kind of like messed up, but learned from it because the third card that I have is actually this American Express card, right? I don't have any other American Express credit cards on my personal credit. This American Express credit card got me into American Express's database. So when I went and applied for my business credit cards, I got 5 business credit cards, and it says on my cards that I've been a member ever since like I had this credit card because it's branded American Express. So this actually helped me get the American Express business credit cards I have. I would not recommend getting this as your first card because they don't give as high of a limits. I've still seen people get, decent limits with this card, but this was the first card that I applied for and it was $500. I was so pissed off. I was so mad. I was like, how dare them give me a $500 credit card? I don't even want this. But I didn't know any better at the time. I didn't have strategy behind it. I was just willy-nilly, just trying to get credit. And that's definitely not the way you want to go about it. So you want to go with the green cash rewards card too. And if you do decide to get a third card, maybe get this as the third card. But this Visa signature flagship card, this is the card that goes up to 80,000. Now you'll notice it has an annual fee of $49. So it does have an annual fee, but it's well worth it because of the limits and the doors and the opportunities that these cards are going to open for you with other financial institutions. Okay, that's the beauty of it, right? So signature cards, these are the cards that you want to go after. When you go to Chase, right? Because Chase, they have that 524 rule where if you've opened up more than 5 credit cards in the last 24 months, you can get denied on personal and business with them. Now, Chase, if they have so many different credit cards, right? And they have a lot of travel cards. So, some of their travel cards, you might see that they are signature cards. Some cards have a higher annual fee, like their Sapphire Reserve card, $550 annual fee. So you definitely want to pay attention to that, right? These are their business credit cards. But if you're looking to just get some personal credit cards, you can look at the different opportunities, rewards, cashback, savings. savings. Always go to the travel cards because they are going to give you higher credit limits with travel cards because they want you to spend more money. All right. And generally their travel cards are about 17,000 with no rep relationship or anything of that nature. And that's just like online applying, right? And you can even go a step further and look for maybe like a travel signature card if they do have one, or, you know, a travel card that you can honestly like use to your benefit, right? That doesn't have a huge annual fee like the Marriott Bonvoy. These are really good. I probably would avoid the Prime one because it's not going to be a super high credit limit with them. And like the Disney, probably not going to be a super high credit limit with that one. But like the World of Hyatt, that's going to be a higher credit limit, right? Just because it's a travel card. So these, and look at British Airways Visa Signature, okay? Signature, $95 annual fee. You can always tell by the annual fee if it's going to be a big boy card or not, right? If it's got a high annual fee, it's probably, you know, going to be a higher value. Signature. All right. So look for those signature cards because those are always going to be of a higher value. All right. Just little side note there. And then again, with Chase, they have that credit reallocation. So say you get two cards at the same time, combine that bad boy. So now you just have one high limit card, and then you can go back in the next 6 to 12 months and get another card. When you're combining the limits, you know, do it strategically. So that way you can have the 0% interest on like a higher limit. So 4 to 6 credit cards, right? You want all of them to have a zero balance except one when you're going for funding. All right. And don't have a balance on all of your cards at the same time. It's just too much of a risk for people. It looks too risky to banks. Even if it's a $10 balance, if you've got $10 to $20 on all of your credit cards, the banks can look at that like a risk and you can get denied. A rep at PenFed told me that, and I'll never forget it. And I was very thankful that he shared that information with me. He said, it doesn't matter the amount. To us as the bank, we look at that like it's risk, you know, it's a risk. And I was like, wow, you know, I never thought about that because when I was learning, the people that I was listening to on YouTube University were telling me to keep a small balance on my credit card. But as time went on, I learned, I earned, and I learned that that wasn't the case, you know, and there's so many different possible strategies for credit out there. So it's sometimes hard to kind of sift through to get to the diamonds, you know, but that's exactly what we're doing. And we have to move slow, right? A lot of people are not going to have your best interest out there. So we want to just like plan strategically and execute, right? And definitely, you know, make sure that you're, you know, doing your own research on this. Don't just take my word for it. Okay. Do your own research and just make sure that you're doing what's best for you, your situation, and your future. Okay. Installment. This is going to be loans, student loans, you know, personal loans, auto loans. You don't want to get a bunch of auto loans in your personal credit. All right. I've had a lot of people that I've helped do like the Turo thing. And even myself, I had 3 auto loans under my personal credit at one point, and it was just a nightmare, right? You really don't want to have more than 2 auto loans on your personal credit because it's going to just kill your debt to income ratio. You really want to hold that auto debt underneath your business, and you can do it with Bank of America. They're one of my favorite. No documents required. You can get you can get up to 4 auto loans per corporation or LLC. And it just requires a personal credit guarantor for your business and very like minimal paperwork, basically just saying that, you know, you are the corporate officer and you approve it, blah, 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 blah. Right. But it's a great way to get your autos and have them under your business that does not report to your personal credit. You still have that payment and all that good stuff. And if you default, it may come up on your personal credit because it's personally guaranteed, but it hides the debt for you. So it's going to save you when it comes to buying a home, because I've had so many people that have just loaded up their personal credit with bad debt, like auto debt. And it's just a killer. They cannot get approved for a home. They cannot get approved for much because their debt to income ratio is just smashed. Even though their credit score looks okay, again, it's not about credit score. It's about the data on your credit reports. And then you can add 2 to 3 authorized user accounts. So you may have a total of like 10 open accounts combined with everything. But in this day and age, we want to focus on quality accounts, right? Even if you do have to start with a secured credit card just to kind of get the party started for yourself and to kind of kick off some primaries, that's fine. You know, do a secured credit card with like a credit union other than Navy Federal. You can do like so many other banks offer secured credit cards that are major, you know, Discover It, that graduates, US Bank, it graduates, and you don't have to have a bank account with those banks in order to get their secured credit card. Same with Bank of America, except for Bank of America doesn't really graduate. It's just going to kind of sit there forever and ever and ever. And the most that you can do with most of these secured credit cards, I think, is about $5,000 in most cases. So a lot of times the secured credit cards don't go up a ton. And, that's why I would prefer to do the secured loans and then kind of work your way up from there. But if you don't have any credit cards in your name, you can go get a quick one from a major bank, but just not, a Chime, not an Open Sky, none of that. We want quality, well-known banks, okay? And iBankNet is great because it's always going to tell you like the facts, right? These are the top credit unions based on the facts, based on the deposits and the assets. And you can also look at banks, right? Which are going to be like your national Chase, right? Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo, US Bank, Goldman Sachs, PNC, Truist, Capital One. That's the top 10 banks right there. Damn near all of them, except for Goldman Sachs, offers a secured credit card probably. I don't know about Wells Fargo, and I don't know if Chase does either. I wouldn't waste a secured card with Chase, but Bank of America, not Wells, but US Bank, PNC offers one. You have to go into a branch to apply for it. So you've got options there, guys. You just got to make sure that you plan it accordingly, right? Boom Pay, we talked about that to add the rental history. Do not add Experian Boost. It's garbage, right? No bank out there is going to look at your Experian Boost accounts and be like, oh, wow, they paid their cell phone. Sure, we'll give them a credit card. Doesn't work like that. It's great for looks, right? And that's what people get hung up on, looks. And I know it looks good and people like to look at their credit score go up, but this is not what we want. This is just filling it with garbage, okay? And we don't want that, because what happens if you pay your utility bill or cell phone bill late? They're just not going to report it, or are they going to report it late? They're probably not going to report it late, but it's just not something that we want. Like I had a client, I looked at his report a couple weeks ago, and he had all this Experian Boost crap and all these like utility Netflix added to his credit. The only thing that wasn't on his credit was real bank trade lines. It's like all those little things don't matter, right? We want to focus on quality stuff with real banks that are in competition with each other, that are going to say, oh, yeah, for sure. You have Truist, you have Bank of America, you have all these of our competitors, we're in. Don't get added to authorized user accounts that have a late payment or high credit usage. Okay. I've had a couple people that I've reviewed their reports. One person in particular, her dad added her to a Macy's store credit card, and that Macy's account had a late payment many, many years ago. Well, it didn't do anything for her credit, but just kind of damage it with a bad account that had a late payment on there. So you don't want to get added, even though it might be appealing because it's, an old age trade line. If it has even one late payment from 10 years ago, it's no good. All right. It doesn't matter. Do not want to get added to any account that has a late payment. Credit usage can always change. Someone can pay off their balance, no problem. But you don't want to be added to a credit card where someone's constantly maxing it out and maybe paying it off on time. It's just not worth it. It would be much more beneficial for someone just to pay to have someone add them that's responsible, and they know they're going to have, all those boxes checked off, right? Okay, let me take a drink of water for this one because this is new. So one of my partners that I work with, that I've been working with for a very, very long time, he's actually one of my good friends now. I've learned a lot from him, and he started in the credit repair industry over 30 years ago. All right, over 30 years ago. He is a data furnisher now. He does not do credit repair anymore. He became a data furnisher, which is a highly lucrative business, right? Definitely look into it. You can make a lot of money becoming a data furnisher. Basically, you report data to the credit bureaus. So now he has become a data furnisher with TransUnion. Right now, it's just with TransUnion, but I'm very skeptical on primary trade lines. I have a lot of people come and ask me, hey, have you heard of this person or that person? Are they legit? I don't know. I don't know. This is the only person that I would trust with primaries because they are very expensive and you take the risk of it not reporting, right? And I just don't know. That risk is sometimes a little too much for like a person that I would recommend. So you have to be careful with primary trade lines. But with these primaries, I can guarantee that they are going to post as promised and as agreed. You have autos for different amounts, which are great. But again, you have to think, is this going to cause a red flag? Because if you have never showed a $20,000 auto loan, you don't get a $60,000 auto loan, right? You have to understand what progression is with credit. If you don't have any, comparables, you want to start at the lower end of things. So you would probably want to start 25 to 35 or maybe 40 to 50. If you don't have anything, 25 to 35. If you already have like an 11,000, you can probably go 40 to 50, right? These are autos. We have home improvement loans, and we also have a revolving credit account, which is basically a line of credit. The cutoff date for the information is the 13th of each month. So we still have a few days left in this month. We upload on the 15th of every single month. The primary trade lines will appear within 30 days on your credit report. So the authorized users are a little bit quicker. They show up within 10 days after the statement date. And of course, I always give you guys the estimated date that they're going to report on, right? The history of these primary trade lines is going to be between 2 and 5 years. All right. Balance is going to be under 15%. So you're still going to have a balance. They will report just like any other account. So once it's closed, they'll report for a 7-year period of time. All right. And this will be like a comparable trade line that you can use forever, pretty much. And some people they need to make these investments if they don't have other comparable credit. So for someone that wanted to do the light stream play, this might be a good opportunity for them if they wanted to get a higher value. If they wanted to get like that 80, 90, 100,000 is max. But if they wanted to go for like 80K, they might want to add the $40,000 to $50,000 trade line and let that kind of report, let that get paid down over a few months, and then go after Lightstream because you're only going to have a very small balance due on that account. Clients can only get 2 primary trade lines. We cannot add more than 2. No CPNs will be used. You cannot use a CPN. Trades will not be given a refund if you use a CPN and for some reason we try to post it, because we have to be very careful for ourselves as well. It goes both ways, right? We don't want to get this whole thing shut down for everybody when we just got it started. So we can't take any exceptions with CPNs. We will require, just like the authorized users, front and back of the driver's license, front and back of the social security card, no exceptions. I might not need the back for these, but the reason why I need it for the authorized user accounts is because, for example, Capital One, they will do what's called credit audits, and they will come and they'll do an audit on all of your authorized users, and they'll require the front and back of the ID and the social card. And if you don't provide it to them, they will shut your account down. How do I know? Well, lucky me, found out the hard way. I got 2 of my Capital One trade lines shut down, completely shut down, because one of my card holders, his social security card was super old. He was an older gentleman, and I guess they could not verify it. So they closed both of my accounts. Well, you live and learn. I also had another client. He was doing trade lines with me. He was adding authorized users to his credit cards with PenFed, and PenFed did an audit on his accounts and they shut down his oldest credit card. So it is a risk that you take when you're in this business, but that's the reason why if you are going to be doing trade lines or adding people to your credit cards, you have to get these documents, because if you get a review of your account and you don't provide all of the docs that they require, which is front and back of social and ID, they will shut your account down, and nobody wants that, right? But the primaries are very straightforward, just to TransUnion, not to Equifax or Experian at this point. Now, I have seen other people out there that are advertising, primary trade lines. I can't vouch for anybody else. I just don't know if they, report or not. But if anyone does have, a solid recommendation or has done business with somebody else out there that has solid primaries, then hey, let's definitely, get them out there so everyone can use them, right? But this has taken me a long time to kind of, put it together. And he actually started this about 6 months ago, but I'm always very slow to start things, even though I've known him for a very long time and I trust him. I've done a lot of business with him. I want to make sure that it's going to be a long-term thing, right? Because I've had other people that have approached me about primary trade lines. This was a couple of years ago and none of them posted. And it's like, I'm not going to, offer this to my community if I can't validate it. And I've actually seen these trade lines on his credit report. So I know that they report. But on the flip side of that, don't take on more than you can handle. Okay. Go slow, go at your own pace. We are focused on long-term success. We are not focused on finishing the race first. You have to stay in your own lane and you have to have your blinders on. You cannot be focused on what they're doing over there or what they're doing over there or what Instagram and TikTok is doing or YouTube. You cannot, okay? It's going to take you off track. You have to put your blinders on and only focus on your own lane and what you can handle financially. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses. We all know that saying where we try to keep up with everyone else, and now is not the time for us. And eventually it's all going to come to a crashing halt, right? We want to go slow. We want to go at our own pace, at a safe pace, so we can set ourselves up for long-term success. And a lot of times when you go too fast, you crash and burn or you get burnt out, right? So we want to go at our own pace and make sure that we are setting ourselves up for long-term success, okay? We've talked about the credit reallocation, one of my favorite plays, especially with Chase. Bank of America is another one that does it. American Express, Capital One, I know they stopped for a while, but I heard that they are doing it again. So I don't know if they are or not, but it said, someone said that they are again. So we'll see, right? US Bank, no. Wells Fargo, yes, but you have to call in. Wells Fargo can be tricky too, because a lot of these reallocation programs stay personal, business. Like Wells Fargo, they only have one business credit card and it's fairly new. So they're one of those that you have to kind of stay in your own lane. Now, Navy Federal is a little bit tricky. I wouldn't necessarily call it credit reallocation, but more or less like they're very flexible with their limits, right? So if you're like, hey, I need this card at like 40K, that's the benefit of calling in, because on the app, you can't tell them what you want. Even though it's not going to be a hard credit pull, it's still, might not give you what you need or what you want. So you can call in with them and kind of see, if they can do it for you. I personally, if I could do it all over again, I would only get 2 credit cards with them, right? I would definitely go after the flagship because that one is their signature card. That's the black credit card that goes up to 80,000. And that's, this card right here. There is a $49 annual fee, but honestly, it's well worth it, right? They also have a pretty good welcome offer right here where you can earn 35,000 points if you spend $3,500 in the first 90 days. So that's pretty good. They have a few other cards, that people might like, but you'll see their cash rewards card is now their cash rewards secure card. This used to be called the N rewards card, and it used to be blue. So they've actually changed that, and you can pre-qualify for their credit cards right on their website or inside of your app. And it's at, the pre-qualification is no hard pull. Once you accept it and, you process the application, that's when you're going to see the hard pull from TransUnion. They pull TransUnion on the personal side and Experian on the business side. You have to have a personal account to get a business account with them. All right. So they are definitely all about those relationships. They do not work with anything related to credit. All right. So if you are a credit business, you need to have your funding website. Okay. This is the website that has nothing to do with credit, doesn't even have the word credit on it, because believe me, I tried it. But I left the word credit on my website and it got me denied because they went right on my website while we were on the phone and basically just like went through the whole thing with a fine-tooth comb and literally found the word credit on my damn website. They probably do like just fines for keywords, and that got me denied. So other credit businesses have, gotten Navy Federal business credit cards, but they have that dummy website, which is basically your bank website. You got your customer website and your bank website, totally separate. And it basically needs to talk about something other than credit. Maybe like consulting, business consulting is fine. A lot of consulting firms are going to be perfect for that. So that's another option. PenFed, little bit, I would say they're good, but the downside about PenFed is they are very old school. Right? They're very, very old school. In fact, if you have to add an authorized user to your credit card with them, you have to fill out a written form and upload it to them. That's how old school they are. And they are very inquiry sensitive. PenFed is an Equifax bank. All right. However, they are getting a little bit tricky nowadays. So they are still Equifax for their credit cards. However, for their lines of credit and their personal loans, which they have really good personal loans, they use Experian. Okay. So just know the difference. If you're going to ask them for a personal loan, which, if you have a good relationship with them, they are great for that purpose. You can get up to $50,000 with PenFed for a personal loan. And then you can leverage that $50,000 for other credit building. Like I would do a secured loan with Navy or maybe another credit union, even PenFed, right? And you can get up to 3 credit cards with PenFed as well. And usually about 80,000 is going to be your max. So the client that I was working with that had different trade lines that he would add authorized users to, he had one that was 20,000 and then 2 that were 15,000. So, pretty good amounts for, PenFed. And that's, another great way that you can kind of say, hey, PenFed, I've got 3 accounts, but I really just want 2. Can you reallocate, this 15 and 15? So now I just have one $30,000, credit card. I would much rather have one $30K card versus 2 15K cards. USAA is going to be a no-go, although they do have good credit products on the personal side, not the business side. They are great for credit cards and personal loans. And the same concept applies for a lot of these like membership type of banks, like credit unions, for example. Anytime you see the word credit union, you can almost know that you have to become a member in order to apply for their credit products, right? Same with USAA. You have to be a member to apply for their credit products. But for a lot of these national banks like Chase, Bank of America, US Bank, all these other banks that we're looking at right here, you do not need to have a bank account with them in order to apply for their credit products. That's the beauty of it. So even though Truist is a very much relationship-based bank, you don't have to have a bank account with them in order to apply for their credit products. It's probably best practice for them, and I would highly recommend it just because I know of all the opportunity that Truist has, because Truist is still an up and coming bank and they're growing. They actually were a part of a merger as well. So they had BB&T and SunTrust Bank merged and became Truist Bank a few years ago. And ever since then, they've really been growing. If you peep game, what does Lightstream say right there? Lightstream by Truist. Okay. So that kind of explains why sometimes Lightstream might pull from Equifax, is because Truist is an Equifax bank, right? Lightstream is still primarily pulling from TransUnion. I've even had some people say, well, if I apply, I'm actually going to freeze my Equifax so they can't pull it because they had some negative stuff on there. I didn't hear anything back from them, but I don't know if they are going to stick with TransUnion or if we're going to start seeing more Equifax polls, because they just recently rebranded their website to kind of mirror Truist's colors and branding and everything, because it used to be orange and blue and it used to say, Lightstream by SunTrust Bank or a SunTrust Bank division, right? So, you kind of have to pay attention to all these small things because they're basically telling you, hey, we're going to kind of follow in that pathway. But either way, it's a great play to be able to leverage some funding and be able to do, a lot of different things with that, right? So what banks look for, right? This is really important to understand because of the fact that we already know banks are not looking for a particular score, right? Even with like auto leases, they'll say, based on credit approval. But that credit approval never says, well, based on a 700 credit score, like you have to have a 700 credit score in order for us to approve you, right? They look at the data points. So it's really important to be able to look at your data points and understand, okay, this is what the banks are looking for. This is what I need to understand if I want to get X, Y, and Z approval, right? Internal scorecard. Everyone here should have a Navy Federal bank account. If you guys don't, please open up a bank account. Okay. I am going to put the script inside of the school community right now before I forget, because everyone in here should have a Navy Federal bank account. And we're going to, focus on the guide. I'll attach the guide to this a little bit later after our call, but the guide basically says, hey, 5 or more banking products. That's what we're focused on. We're focused on, building the relationship with them and then opening up 5 or more banking products, Navy Federal bank account. Now, some people might consider this lying. Some people might not be comfortable with this. If you're not comfortable with it, don't do it, but I would not buy a membership ID number from someone. I had like someone in my comments, I don't remember if it was like what social media platform, but they're like, oh, I have a membership ID that I'm selling for a price. No, you don't ever want to do that. Just get creative and say that your family member was in the Navy. Okay. But they have internal scoring system, right? And a lot of times it's not advertised with any of these banks, but it's their internal data that they used to, basically approve you, right? And a lot of times with Navy Federal, if you apply for a credit product and whether you're approved or denied, they'll send you a letter or a notice in the mail saying, hey, you were approved or denied, and this was your credit score. And usually on the back of that page, it will say your internal data or your internal score is, this out of this, right? And that's really the only time that you're going to know like what your internal score is with Navy, because it's not like they advertise it or provide it to you inside of the app. It's based on, all of those data points that you're using to bank with them, right? Are you getting overdrafts? If so, your internal data score is going to be really low because you have overdrafts in your bank account. And that's one of the biggest factors that can get you denied for something as simple as a pledge loan or a secured loan that's going to help you build credit, no hard credit pull, reports to all 3 credit bureaus, but you could get denied if you aren't even, showing that you can manage your bank account properly. properly. All right. FICO scores, obviously very important, but I've seen people with a low FICO score still get approved for some of these, bank accounts and stuff. Focus on your relationship. Pick 3 credit unions of your choice. Navy Fed should be one, just because we know they're pretty much going to be a slam dunk right now. They're the #1 credit union and they're balling. The numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. People, influencers, gurus, people that are on live begging for business on TikTok, they lie. But these numbers do not lie. Okay. And Navy Federal is the #1 credit union based on facts and assets. All right. Yes, it does work. And if you feel like you're getting some pushback from somebody, or you feel like the phone call ain't going well, hang up and call back and get another rep on the phone and say, man, I just signed up for my bank account with you guys and I'm driving and I got disconnected. I was just giving them my information to do my initial deposit. Can I finish that up with you? And that way it's done, right? If they ask for the DDT 14, I'm sorry, I'm driving. I don't have that information right now. Don't try to be slick and, be fancy and go online and try to apply. Don't do that. Okay. Call. Do not apply online this way. Okay. You got to call them. And just like we have here, someone said, it calls. If they give you any pushback, hang up, call back. Someone is going to approve your account. Never had anyone that I told to have call more than 5 times. Yep, that's exactly correct. And you guys were using the grandfather was in the Navy, and it definitely works. I mean, I used to sell this play, like this play that I just put into the community, $100 per person. When I lived in Antioch, this was probably 2020. I was making $200 a day selling this play to people, cash out all day. So, I don't do it now, but I mean, you could make a lot of money like this. Okay. Whether you want to do that, it's totally up to you. But I feel like, Navy Fed is definitely, it's the door that opens, this the door that keeps giving, really, right? But it also opens up other opportunities for us with other financial institutions. So that's the biggest part to the puzzle, is if we can get them to give us 25K, we can piggyback off that and then go to Chase. And we've already kind of got that standard. We've already got that foundation, right? Now, if we go to Chase and all that we have is a $500 secured credit card from US Bank, they're probably still going to approve us. They might give us 1,000, they might give us 1,500, right? But they're going to give us comparables to what we already have on our credit profile. And that's why it's so important to understand how to build this profile up the right way, even if it takes a little bit longer, and take your time, do it right. Right? Because everyone's always in a all fire rush. I get it. I wanted it as bad as you guys did too. Okay. And I was so frustrated when I kept getting those $500 approvals, but there's method to the madness, right? Add authorized users, high limit, build your relationships, get Navy to give you high limits, and then the other banks will follow. Okay, that's the beauty of it. Debt to income ratio. Okay, this is not a contributing factor to your credit score. Okay. However, it does play a big part, because the banks want to make sure that if we give you this little bit of money, you're going to be able to pay us back as agreed. Okay. And the debt to income ratio needs to match that. So what that means is generally your debt to income ratio should be less than maybe 20%. You can look online and see what the best debt to income ratio would be for your particular credit product, right? Auto loans, less than 20%. That's going to be all of the debt. All of the income, what comes in and what goes out, basically, right? So they want to make sure that, what comes in and what goes out, there's enough left over at the end of the day for you to take on this additional debt. When you are using your income on credit applications, it's important for you to use your household income, all right? Because it's going to be a higher number and they're going to feel more comfortable lending to you. Now, if you put down that your income is $65,000, which, you know, that's a reasonable amount, you know, but the banks don't look at it like that. They're like, well, if you're asking for, you know, $50,000 loan and you only make $65,000 a year, the math ain't mathing, you know, so those numbers need to be a little bit higher. Inside the credit community, I've given you guys the numbers that are to be used on the application, closer to like 180,000, which is still totally believable, because if you have 2 to 3 adults in a household that work, that's, you know, totally reasonable. So use your household income, fluff that number up a bit if you need to, you know, don't over exaggerate, because again, we don't want to overextend ourselves. But what we do want to have is the opportunity to be able to, you know, grow, right? And credit is the only way to really to do that these days. It's a no-brainer, guys. So relationships with banking scores, length of history, the deposits, the banking products. Banks love CDs, certificate of deposits. Okay. They also like stability indicators, no overdrafts. Okay. Constant and frequent deposits. If you don't have a payroll provider and you are self-employed, you might want to think about subscribing to ADP payroll services so you can groom some of your relationships with the banks and have a small percentage of your payroll deposited into these accounts from a payroll provider, because they pay attention to all that stuff, right? And even if it's a low amount, few $100, that's okay, because they know a lot of people don't get 100% of their check into, you know, one bank account. You've kind of got to spread it out into multiple accounts and, you know, build relationships with multiple banks. I wouldn't necessarily do more than 3 bank accounts at a time, because every time you apply for a bank account, your check systems or early warning report is being ran. So if you apply for too many, like real close proximity, or keep on applying for them, you can be red flagged. So you want to just be careful. Now, Navy Federal, a lot of people are able to get into Navy Federal that have had previously declined bank accounts because they use early warning instead of check systems. So early warning is a consumer reporting agency, and they report banking data just like the credit bureaus report credit data, right? So you can go to their website and you can request your consumer report. And it's very important to do so, because this is the data that they are going to see when you apply and when they look at your, you know, profile and fully, you know, do, hey, you're officially approved. Because I've had some people where they got their application in, everything was processing, and then a few days later, they're like, oh, nope, we can't approve you. And they didn't ever understand why. And I'm like, well, you need to figure out how you can get this resolved. And a lot of times it's probably going to boil down to the data that's on this report, right? Check systems is same concept. So if you have never seen your check systems report or your early warning report, just go on their website and request a copy of your consumer report. It's free. You got to know what's on these things, right? Because sometimes you might have like an old bank account. You didn't even realize that, you know, hey, I forgot I closed this account, or the account was closed and I owe them $40 or something, right? So you have to make sure that, you know, you get all that stuff resolved, but you can totally go onto their websites and request a free copy of that report. And you can also dispute that information just like you would with the credit bureaus. They have to follow the same FCRA and FDCPA laws that the credit bureaus have to follow, because they are all data furnishing companies. They all furnish data. All right. And then, of course, stability indicators are employment, residence, banking history. I talked a little bit about that before as far as employment goes. Never self-employed. You've always want to say that you are a full-time employee and that you have been with that employment for, you know, 5 years. That's kind of like the magic number. If you're like, well, I haven't, you know, 2 years is like the minimum, right? Because again, they want to see that stability, that you're consistent, because someone that shows those type of, you know, features, they are a low risk in their eyes, right? Residents, same thing. Like sometimes I've had people where they lived in, you know, not so great areas, and we've had to change their address to a friend or family member's address so they'll have better access to funding based on their residence and their home, zip code and all that good stuff. Because think about it, if you are in like a bad area in like Oakland, California, 0 to 20,000 income, which, these days is like unheard of, but say that's an example, right? If you're in that zip code versus Beverly Hills zip code, right, where you've got $1 million earners, which one do you think is going to get the better approval, right? It's only, it's like common sense at the same time, but like I wouldn't normally think, oh man, just because of the area, I'll get better approvals. But I know firsthand that's absolutely the truth because I went through it, So, sometimes it's, an opportunity. You can also use, your business for that and just make sure that you get like a office in a really nice location and a higher scale zip code. So that way you can use that area. And then of course, you've got your tier 1 to tier 4 lending categories. You want to stick with the best type of lenders for what you're trying to go after. Credit unions are going to be number 1. That's going to be like your tier 1, where you definitely want at least 3 credit unions that you're building relationships with, right? And some of these credit unions we may have never heard of, right? I had never heard of Navy Federal before this, right? But they were a game changer for me. I mean, I got a car loan with a 3.89% interest rate. When I refinanced one of my auto loans several years ago, my credit score was only a 670, but it saved me $250 a month that I was flushing down the toilet that was going straight to interest. Think about if I was still paying that today, I would have just wasted thousands and thousands of dollars on nothing. Right? So leveraging these relationships to refinance your vehicles or even get a new vehicle at a very low interest rate is well worth it, right? We're going to try to wrap this up pretty quickly here. We got a few more slides to go after. So the 50K funding blueprint is basically planning your funding sequence, right? Who do they pull credit from? Lock the other credit profiles. So if you're doing a funding sequence from TransUnion, lock Experian and Equifax so they can't look at it. Now, if you're not trying to hide anything and you could care less, so be it. Like I don't ever lock them because all mine are the same across the board, right? But that's not always the case for people. Build that relationship with credit unions, 3 to 6 months. Wait until you have been with them for 3 to 6 months before you apply for anything, right? We don't want to seem like we're just after their credit products. We want to let them know that we're invested in this relationship and that we hope that they invest in us in the future, right? We're looking to build a long, healthy, well-established funding relationship with them. Secured credit products, you want to do this as soon as possible. Basically all that you have to do is just make sure that you have the funds in your savings account, right? So as soon as you open up your, accounts with these banks, put the money in your savings account, do a pledge loan with them, right? Here's another hack. If you can open up your bank account with a deposit of $10,000 or more, that's going to kickstart your bank rating with the bank inside. And that's going to give you like a higher rating initially because you made that initial $10,000 deposit. I have a rep that I work with at PNC, and she was basically saying now, like if someone doesn't have a relationship with PNC, they almost need them to make that initial deposit of 10K or better so they can get them access to better credit products, So it definitely, helps. If you can't, totally understandable, just do what you can. The main thing here is just getting those accounts open, established, and to start building, right? And then do the secured loan as soon as possible. Even if you can only do the minimum for the secured loan, do it, right? At least it's something. The minimum is $250. All right. But the goal with these secured loans is to keep them open for at least 2 years. All right. At least 2 years. You can pay 70, 80% down in the first month, let it report, let the balance report, and then pay it off and then do a small deposit or small small payment, auto payment of a few dollars every month. So it's calculated out, right? Because you don't want to close it too soon. You really want that, payment history that's going to help you out. And then focus on 5 banking products or more. High yield savings account, overdraft protection is a banking product, a CD, which is a certificate of deposit. Look at the other banking products that the bank offers and get 5 or more banking products, because banks love people that invest in their bank. CD accounts, you're not going to have access to those funds for, whatever amount you select, a minimum usually of like 1 year, but it's worth it. It's like a little nest egg for you that's just, collecting money for you. Make frequent deposits, especially if you don't have, direct deposit. Make frequent deposits into that account. You can recycle the same funds, get that pledge loan started. It's just the secured loan. Not all credit unions do a secured loan. So when you are searching for credit unions that are going to be good fit for you, make sure that they offer that secured loan credit builder product, because it is a game changer, and that can help you avoid having to get that secured credit card with them. And with the secured loan, you have access to the funds, and it's just a way better experience than having to put, maybe if you had 5,000, all 5,000 towards a credit card that you're never going to get those funds back until it graduates, which may be a year or more, unless it's like Discover, which even Discover, we don't know what the future holds because they're merging with Capital One, but they used to have at least 7 months before it would graduate and you would get your deposit back. So pledge loans a much better way to leverage that whole play, right? And then adding high limit authorized user trade lines, apply late at night, make sure you don't have any fraud alerts, no consumer statements. All the information that you have on your credit report must match the application. If the addresses are different, you're going to have a problem. Okay. So make sure all of the personal information is exactly the correct that's on your credit report. Here are some of the top bad credit-friendly credit unions: Navy, DCU, Langley Federal Credit Union, Penn Air, Security Plus, Premier, Justice, Trulant, Dover. And then number 10 is not just one, but some, like what I was talking about earlier, is looking for those credit unions that really invest in their members. Credit unions that specialize in police, teachers, fire, even like Chevron Credit Union, because, they are very invested in their employees. Farmers Credit Union, again, they're vested in their, members, which are generally their employees. But those are some of the better credit unions. I love the teacher credit unions: Teachers Federal Credit Union, Apple Federal Credit Union. Apple's a lot harder to get into now, but if you can get into Apple Federal Credit Union, I had a client that got $35,000 credit card with them by just adding high limit authorized users, and then basically doing the same thing that we did with Apple as we did with Navy: pledge loan, 5 or more banking products, CD account, and just went from there. But looking for those specialized credit unions, right? And a lot of times on their website, you can say, you could tell who you might want to go with versus others, right? If you're a business owner, you might not want to go with PenFed because they don't have a business side, right? You might want to go with, another credit union like Dover or Langley that has a really strong business side to them. But really doing your research and making sure that that credit union is going to be a well-rounded credit union for you and your future on personal and business. Here are some additional credit unions that could potentially stand out to you. Credit Union of SoCal, they offer financing up to $30,000, no documents required. Patelco Credit Union, PenFed, Blue Peak Credit Union, and USC Credit Union, they just have a lot of opportunity there, right? And also using iBankNet, which is this website right here, to look at the top credit unions and, regional banks and all that good stuff, right? Community banks, regional banks, those ones you don't want to miss up either, because they have really flexible underwriting. And a lot of times when you go into a branch and you sit down with a relationship manager, they can help you get approved for better credit products. Okay. And that's really important to understand, is when you are dealing with a US bank, a Truist, some of these local banks, PNC, find a relationship manager. Don't just go online and apply. Okay. You're going to get much better and bigger approvals if you go into into a branch and you sit down with someone and you work with a relationship manager to get you those approvals that you want. That way they can kind of push you through underwriting and all that good stuff. So we've got Regions, Key Bank, First Bank of Alabama, Community Trust Bank, U.S. Bank. You know, sometimes you have to be close to a location, especially for like Truist, U.S. Bank, PNC. So these are all really good banks. And I'm sure, you know, you guys will find more that might be just local to you, right? Another one of my favorite credit unions here in California is San Diego County or San Diego Federal Credit Union. They are really good. They do the pledge loans, secured loans, and they also have really good autos and, you know, everything, right? Just like Navy Fed, right? Credit unions, community banks, and local banks are really the hidden gems, right? And a lot of us have probably never really paid attention until now, right? So now it's like, let's pay attention to our surrounding banks and let's interview the banks and see what they can do for us, right? Because we might not want to go bank with this bank after we ask them some questions on what type of credit products do they have and what do those limits look like. If a bank tells me that they only approve up to $10,000 credit cards, I'm not going to bank with them. I'm not interested in banking with them at all, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions and interview the bank and actually walk into a branch and sit down with a relationship manager and ask these questions. Have questions on, you know, a sheet of paper as if you were interviewing, you know, a person or, you know, a job or whatever, you know, but these questions are going to be important. You know, what's important to you? Is it, you know, hey, what type of business credit products do you have? What type of limits do you guys offer? What documents are required for these said credit products? You know, don't be afraid to ask those questions because you will be surprised as to what you get. And that's going to help you make your decision on who you want to move forward with, right? What we are looking for, no doc funding or credit products. No doc, no documents required, no bank statements, no tax returns. No financial records are required to apply for funding. And that is very common with credit unions, regional banks, because they don't want to do all that. They want to give out money. They have to give out money, right? But they also have to give out money to qualified individuals, right? They're not so focused about documents versus like if you go into, say, an auto dealership and apply for, you know, an auto loan, they might ask you for bank statements. They might ask you for, you know, some pay stubs. It's very common, but that's why we don't even want to mess with them. We want to go straight to the credit unions and then figure out where to go from there, right? But generally, you know, funding that is up to $50K is usually no documents, all right? Lightstream, we've all kind of heard of this play by now. It's a great play. You're basically going to apply on Lightstream's website for an auto loan from a private party, and then the funds will be sent to your bank account and you don't have to upload the title. I mean, anything could change between the time that you apply for it and the time that you get the funds, right? Maybe the buyer or the seller decided that they don't want to sell it anymore, or they sold it to somebody else because you took too long getting the funding. Well, it's not like you can just give the money back, right? So, you know, be creative with these funds and leverage these funds, right? Create additional trade lines on your credit profile, right? And understand the whole comparable credit, right? So if you've already had an auto loan or a personal loan for $40,000, then you can definitely go after 60 to 70,000. But if you've only had an auto loan for maybe 20,000, 60 to 70 might get denied. But that's why you call into the reconsideration line and see if they will approve you for maybe 30, 40,000, right? Whatever you can get them to approve you for, and then focus on, okay, now I've done 20, now I've done 40, 50, now I'm progressing up and up and up. Right? If ever denied from a credit product from any bank or financial institution, research the reconsideration line. Just go to Google, type in reconsideration line for Truist, reconsideration line for XYZ, call them, or just call into customer service and ask them to transfer you to their underwriting department, their credit department, and then ask them to, do a manual review and see why they approved you or why they disapproved you. And maybe if you can lower what you're asking for, they can get you approved, right? A lot of times they can definitely do that. Sample funding path. Everyone's going to look a little bit different, but this is kind of like a basic one. If you were in the 500s and you wanted to get to the 600s, clean up your personal info, dispute the negatives, add some primaries, join some credit unions, and then go after the personal lines of credit, the credit cards, and do some credit stacking. And then you can get easy 50,000 from just, some of the credit unions that you are applying for. And again, all of this will be inside of this presentation that you guys will have. Do not use CPNs. I know that they can be very like, oh my God, I can get some free money or blah, 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 blah. They are completely illegal. And people that use CPNs, if they get caught, they will get arrested and go to jail. I see it on social media happen all the time. People try to go buy an auto with a CPN and it can get you into a lot of trouble. So we want to avoid CPNs. Do not use them. It's not worth it. I know it can sound tempting and people make it sound really good. And I actually had a client that I worked with several years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and he bought a CPN from somebody and his profile started to merge. So that was really bad. The CPN stuff was starting to show up on his profile and it was just a mess of a situation. So, just go about it the right way. You don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. The easiest credit hacks to kind of use to get you cleaned up from the negatives are the data breach or that you've been mixed up with somebody else. That's probably my favorite one. Like, I've been mixed up with somebody else. I may have been mixed up with my family member or my parent or somebody with a similar name, but this is definitely not me. You want to call in and deal with that with the credit bureaus over the phone because they can get that corrected for you pretty quickly. We're going to use the KISS method where we keep it super simple. You don't have to over explain yourself. There might be long periods of silence. That's okay. People tend to over talk when they're nervous. Don't, okay? Less is better. Just keep it simple. Credit progression. This refers to the process of improving your credit scores over time from a lower credit score to a higher one, or from a lower credit limit to a higher one. Progression, right? And it goes up over time, right? Building credit, improving your credit score, getting your credit limits increased every 6 months. Those are all going to help you progress to the next level, right? Because credit is about levels. And you have to understand that there are levels to this stuff, right? You're not going to just get $100,000 auto loan if you have never even had a $50,000 auto loan, right? And in fact, my grandmother had an 800 credit score. I was trying to have her co-sign a vehicle for me, and she was denied because she had always paid cash for her autos. So she had never financed an auto. Therefore, she had no comparable credit. So they were like, yeah, we don't care if you have an 800 credit score. You don't have anything that shows us comparable credit. So no. And it was like a $60,000 auto loan too. So that's another, proof in the pudding of it's not about the score. It's all about the data and that comparable credit to make banks feel more confident in lending to you. The key factors in credit progression: payment history, amounts owed, length of credit history, new credit. You don't want to constantly be getting new credit. Once you get 3 to 4 credit accounts, take a break. Don't apply for anything else on the personal side for, at least 6 to 12 months. Just take a break and let those accounts age and just focus on, building those credit limits up. Focus on quality, 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 not quantity, because when you get too much quantity, it leaves more room to get late payments and have those slip ups that we just do not want. Okay. How to improve your credit progression: you have to make sure you pay all bills on time. All bills that report to the credit must be paid on time. Setting up those automatic payments, making sure you're making additional payments, right? You can make 2 payments to your credit cards in a month. It won't hurt. Keeping your credit utilization low, like under 10% low. Avoid applying for too many new credit accounts at once, because this is going to reduce your history and it can also reduce your credit score. Monitor your credit reports for errors. This is something that you really have to make sure that you get obsessed with. Credit Karma is a great tool, right? It is not your FICO credit score, but it is a great tool for data, right? And I don't care what the score is, because if you understand how to look at the data and how to analyze the data and you're following the data, the score is going to follow. So no problem, right? And then also consider some credit building products. I prefer the secured loans over secured credit cards, because if you do it strategically with these credit unions, you can do the secured loan, not have a credit pull, and not have all that mess that comes along with it, no access to the funds and stuff like that. With the secured loan, you're going to have access to the funds. You're still going to have the money in your account, versus the secured credit card. It's like gone, basically. So the only way that you're going to get it back is if your card graduates, which could be a while if it does graduate, right? Or if you close it, which we don't want to do. That's super counterproductive. And I've had clients that have done that. They've done like a $3,000 secured credit card and we're like, oh my gosh, 6 months later, I need the money back. So I've got to close the account. And it's like, that was a waste. We could have done a $3,000 secured loan and not had this issue. Because eventually loans are going to close because they're paid off. So it's no big deal. But secured credit cards, we don't want to close them, right? Once you have a credit card, a revolving credit line open, you want to keep it open for as long as possible. Even if you're like, fuck that bank, I hate them, I'm never going to use them again. It doesn't matter how you feel, right? We just need to use them for what they're worth. And if it's just worth sitting on our credit report, putting the card in a drawer and letting it collect dust just to help us on our credit report, great. Just use them for that. But don't get mad and say, well, I'm going to close it or I'm not going to pay it. Don't let your emotions get the best of you, because these are type of things that get people in trouble for long term. And, it's the simple things like making a late payment or not paying it as agreed that have such a long-term negative effect on us. So we really have to separate our emotions from the business and understand we're focused on playing this here game of credit, and we are going to win, because the banks, they could care less, right? They do not have our backs. They don't want us to know this information. And they just, a lot of times they don't know it themselves. They just do what the bank tells them to do. They're by the book Bettys, And of course, understanding your credit scores. They range from 300 all the way up to 850. It was funny because I was watching social media and I saw a guy that was using an influencer to say how he helped her get credit and funding. And she was like, yeah, my credit score is 900. And I was like, 900? Like, what? Like, this lady is crazy. It was that whoa Vicky lady, but she just was like 900. Like, this lady is just stupid. So yeah, it goes up to 850. And then of course you can't focus on the score. You have to focus on the data points. And I focused on the score for a long time and it just didn't get me anywhere. It kept me in those low level approvals and just being mad all the time. So understanding that data and how to properly leverage that data is going to be important in building those relationships, right? So what are the next steps? What should we be working on this week? Well, we got to get those credit unions. All right. If you have Navy, find 2 more. All right. Look at iBankNet and see who these top, contenders are. You've got over 100 credit unions right here that you can look at and start going through and figuring out who the best ones are going to be for you. NASA, a lot of these are just grade A banks like Baxter, Connecticut. I'm seeing so many that I really have, like, man, those are just great. And a lot of times anyone can join these. San Diego County Credit Union, they're number 33. So they're another really great one. Space Coast, again, any credit union that specializes in something, space, teachers, police, fire, man, those are the ones that we need to be with because they're going to invest in us, right? Getting your credit reports and going through it with a fine-tooth comb and disputing any errors, cleaning all of that stuff up, making sure your personal information is 100% accurate. You have one name, you have one address, and all of that is consistent across the board. Your name is consistent. And every time you put a credit application, you use the same data, the same consistency. You're not using, well, on this application, I'm going to do first name, middle initial, last name. On this one, I'm going to do first name, full middle name, full last name. No, set up your, what I call a funding ID card, right? And this is all of my identifiers that I'm going to use on my funding application. The name that I use, if it's just first and last, so be it. Use that on every application. Middle is not required, right? How I approve or how I, use drive. Am I going to spell it out or am I going to put DR period, right? Putting all of this under my ID card. What am I going to use for my annual income or household income or projected income? So I know, I make sure that I'm being consistent with my data on all of these credit applications. Okay. And then focusing on building credit and adding quality trade lines. Okay. Access the classroom section in the community because there is just a ton of information in here. There is also access to digital products in here. You can create your own digital products. There are 8 of them in here right now. So you can create your own inside of Canva, but there's just a ton of information in here for you guys. All right. And if you feel like you do need one-on-one, I do have a few openings. Sometimes my schedule is like a week out, but there is still opportunity for those of you that feel like, hey, I feel like I need more of a guided approach. Book a call with me. I have 1-year mentorship, 6-month mentorship where we work one-on-one, me and you, and we meet a few times a month and really nail this thing out and figure it out and take action and of course, get it done, right? So that's all. That's it for now. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. It's already 8 p.m. My gosh, it's 4 hours that we've been on this call. And I'll answer a few questions here. Let's see. Can you ask for a higher limit if approved for a loan? Absolutely. So say, for example, you get approved for a loan and you're like, oh man, that's not the amount that I wanted. I only got 10,000. Like, man, what is wrong with them? Absolutely call into the reconsideration line. Same process, speak to the credit department. Sometimes they may be able to do something for you and sometimes they couldn't. Like I was pissed when I got my Wells Fargo Reflect card because it had 0% interest for like 21 months, right? And I want to say that they didn't even give me I think it was not even 6,000 that they approved me for. So I called in to the reconsideration line to see if I can get a higher amount. And they basically told me no. And I was like, well, can I just cancel the card? Because I don't want it. I just want to close it. And they're like, no, you have to wait until you receive the card in the mail and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, whatever. So now I've just been using that card to put all my expenses on so I can raise the limits over time the good old fashioned way, right? But you absolutely can call in to see if they will reconsider you for a higher limit. I had that happen to a client recently where it's like, I don't understand why he got approved for such a low amount when we set up everything, right? But we are also in a delicate phase with, the way that the world is. Some banks are, kind of holding back a little bit, if you will, right? So you don't always have to accept what they give you. You can always turn it down and then apply for it a little bit later on if they're not willing to negotiate anything with you, from here on out. The one-on-one mentorship, 6 months, 3,500, 1 year, 5K. Yes, there are payment plans. You can also email me. This is my email address right here. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. And then you all my one-on-one clients, they have their own link to book their own calls, or we set up like a schedule where I might meet with them every other Wednesday or whatever day of the week. And then we just know that that's our time to meet, right? You just paid for your credit report. Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely. I have my links inside of the community as well. So if you go to the credit community and you want to book a call with me, you can book either a 15-minute call or a 1-hour call. If you want to sign up for the high-level mentorship, this is the link right here. You can definitely, book a call with me and speak, hey, maybe I need a payment plan or something of that nature. Email me, book a quick call with me. I still have some calls left for this coming week. So definitely get in, because I know I had a few people reach out last week and were like, do you have anything open sooner? And it's like, nope, unfortunately, I don't, but I still have some openings now. So definitely get in there. But thank you guys all so much for joining me tonight on my birthday. You guys could be anywhere, but I truly appreciate you listening in and joining the call. 4 hours worth of credit game, guys. I'm going to wrap it up. We're going to head to dinner tonight, way later than expected. My family's still waiting for me out there, but the party must go on. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you guys on our next call. Bye, everyone.